In Victorian England, accepting a marriage proposal meant never touching fish with a knife or positioning yourself with your back facing a window ever again. Break these hidden rules and society would literally delete you from existence. A single wrong glove shade or botched greeting and every door slammed permanently. People stopped acknowledging your presence, invitations vanished, and in an era where social networks meant survival itself, this amounted to a death sentence. So yeah, if these tales help you drift off, go ahead and subscribe. And I'm wondering, what's the hour where you're at? Drop your location and time in the comments. Sometimes I notice someone from California tuning in at 3 p.m. and I'm thinking, are you taking a nap? Alright, let's transport ourselves to Victorian England. But before we do, get settled. I'm serious. Fix those pillows, pull that blanket close, because the place we're headed, you're definitely going to need the comfort. The darkness slowly fades as pale morning rays seep through thick damask drapes. Your eyelids open to reveal an ornately wallpapered ceiling, its delicate floral design barely discernible in the faint light. This is London, 1863, and you're the oldest daughter in an aristocratic household. The first sensation isn't the light, it's the bitter cold. Your bedroom, even in one of Mayfair's wealthiest estates, is absolutely arctic. Unlike your cosy, climate-controlled room right now, Victorian mansions were ice chambers. Not even wealth could shield you from winter's brutal grip. Coal fireplaces offered the soul warmth and they died during the night. So that initial moment of waking, absolute shivering agony, you don't stir, yet you're unable to. In affluent Victorian homes, decorum required waiting for your lady's maid to arrive and commence your day. Shifting before that moment would be, well, no respectable lady would even contemplate it. I devoted months studying Victorian women's personal journals just to grasp their morning rituals. The degree of inflexible formality would make most of us lose our minds, but for them, just another Tuesday. A gentle tap on the door and your lady's maid steps in, carrying a ceramic basin of tepid water. You're fortunate. In bourgeois households, they'd be using the previous day's bath water, warmed up with a heated brick thrown in. The wealthy at minimum got fresh water. "Good morning, miss," she murmurs quietly, placing the basin down and promptly moving to pull back the drapes. It's 7:30. Lady Montgomery's tea is scheduled for this afternoon. Those particular words. Words trigger a surge through you, more powerful than any caffeine. Lady Montgomery's tea, among the most significant social occasions of the week. Your mother has been plotting this for days now. Jane, you address your maid, attempting to mask the nervousness in your tone. The blue gown or the green for today. The maid hesitates, and you notice her thoughtfully weighing her answer. She's 23, merely 2 years your senior, but the calluses marking her palms and the cautious manner she moves make her appear generations older. The blue, miss, she finally responds. Lady Montgomery remarked last week that green brings illness to mind, and there you have it. One incorrect colour selection could sabotage not merely your afternoon, but potentially an entire marriage strategy. Because that's what these social gatherings were truly about. The meticulously orchestrated matrimonial marketplace. Speaking of orchestrated performances, dressing as a Victorian woman of status was essentially an Olympic event. You're about to observe the daily ordeal. First, the lightweight cotton chemise slides over your head. Next, the knee-length dressiers. Victorian undergarments resembled shorts more than anything, split at the crotch for bathroom purposes. Just picture the mechanics of that, with all those additional layers not pleasant. Then arrives the first torture device, the corset. Your maid positions it around your middle and you grip the bedpost. Steadying yourself, she starts pulling the cords. Imagine this. Your lungs being squeezed by whalebone and string, your ribcage pushed inward, your backbone realigning. The Victorian perfect waist measured 18 inches, physically unattainable for most women without extreme corseting. You manage quick, shallow respirations as each pull makes the corset more restrictive. A bit more? Miss? Jane inquires, understanding that today's social appearance demands flawlessness. Yes, you wheeze, though your body protests no. Lady Montgomery will observe if I'm not adequately constricted. The blood floods your face as the corset compresses further. Numerous Victorian women routinely passed out from this custom. It wasn't fragile constitutions, it was actual oxygen starvation. Some developed twisted ribs and shifted organs, all for achieving a socially approved figure. You know what's insane? There exist medical volumes from this period displaying how corseting literally reorganized women's interior organs. I've examined the diagrams: livers shoved upward, intestines crushed, ribs permanently warped, the sacrifices we make for style. Right following the corset comes the framework crinoline, a contraption of metal rings that spreads your skirt outward in that iconic Victorian dome shape. It weighs roughly 7 pounds by itself. Then the petticoats for insulation and fullness, followed by the gown itself. When completely dressed, a Victorian woman hauled around 15-20 pounds of garments every single day. Once attired, you settle at your dressing table while Jane arranges your hair. No simple task, given Victorian women seldom trimmed their hair. Many possess strands extending to their knees. The heaviness could trigger migraines and neck discomfort, but cutting it was deemed outrageous. The perfect Victorian woman was fundamentally half person, half furnishing, cushioned, draped and fastened into compliance. As Jane secures the final locks into position, you observe her hands are chapped and split. This isn't shocking. She roused at 4:30 this morning, ignited the fires, assisted the cook with breakfast preparation, buffed silver and still needed to look completely presentable to attend you. She'll labour until after your bedtime tonight, approximately 18 hours altogether, and receive about $16 annually. That's roughly $100 to $800 in current currency for what constitutes relentless toil. Okay, so you're clothed, your hair is arranged, your face has been cleansed with rose water. Cosmetics are for prostitutes and stage performers, per Victorian morality, though numerous women covertly applied it regardless. Now it's time to go downstairs for breakfast. The corridors of your house are hushed as you navigate downstairs. Despite employing 14 servants, proper service meant undetectable service. They've been coached to vanish when family members approach, retreating into doorways or servant hallways, gazes lowered. If you spotted them, they weren't performing their duties properly. Hold on, let me share something bizarre about Victorian houses. They were literally constructed to conceal servants. Residences had distinct staircases, passages, and even doorways so that family members wouldn't need to witness the actual labour that sustained their existence. Out of sight, out of mind. It's like receiving your Amazon deliveries magically materialise without ever observing the courier. At breakfast, your father occupies the table's head, already wearing his morning jacket, perusing the Times. Your mother sits at the opposite end, while your two younger siblings sit facing you. The table is covered with plates, eggs, kip toast, coddled eggs, ham, and jams. The Victorians took breakfast seriously. "Good morning, father," you announce with a slight curtsy. Yes, even to your own father and mother, protocol was preserved. He looks up momentarily. "Good morning, Eleanor. I trust you rested well. It's not truly an inquiry, so you merely nod and assume your place." A footman materialises soundlessly at your side to pour you tea. You're cautious not to thank him outright, acknowledging too intimately was deemed unsuitable. Instead, you offer a subtle nod. The regulations surrounding servants were ridiculously intricate. You weren't meant to thank them for performing their duties, but disregarding them entirely was discourteous. You were supposed to remember everyone's name, but seldom employ it. You should recognise if they accomplished something remarkable, but never spotlight errors. Breakfast dialogue is sparse and restrained. Victorian propriety mandated that mornings weren't for life. Animated conversation. Your father intermittently comments on reports from the newspaper. Your mother reminds everyone regarding Lady Montgomery's tea. Eleanor, she states, folding her napkin. Just so. Remember that Lady Montgomery's niece will attend today. She's recently betrothed to Viscount Howick's son. Do ensure to congratulate her, though naturally not before Lady Montgomery has mentioned the engagement herself. This represents the type of social minefield you traverse daily. If you congratulate the niece prematurely, you seem forward too delayed, and you look impolite or envious. Every exchange has regulations within regulations. In your mind you're thinking, how am I meant to recall all this? But externally, you simply nod and respond, yes, mother. Following breakfast, your morning is occupied with suitable activities for a young woman. Some embroidery, which you despise but must master. Piano rehearsal, at which you're average, though nobody would dare mention so. And a French tutorial with your siblings. The entire duration, your stomach is twisted with worry about the afternoon tea, because here's the harsh reality of Victorian upper-class women's existence. Social exchanges weren't merely courtesies, they were survival. Your whole future hinged on creating the correct impressions, obtaining the proper marriage, preserving the proper connections. Meanwhile, 3 floors beneath and 5 hours prior, the day had already commenced. For those who enabled your life of comfort, let me sketch this picture for you. It's 4:30 a.m. The scullery maid, Mary, merely 13 years old, awakens on her thin mattress in the garret. The area's bitter cold. Servants' accommodations weren't heated. Her hands are weathered and weeping from scrubbing dishes in caustic soap and cleaning floors on hands and knees. She has precisely 3 minutes to dress before she must be downstairs starting fires. No time to bathe. That's a weekly indulgence for someone of her rank. Her dress is moist from laundering it the previous night. Her single pair of boots has openings, but she must move swiftly or encounter the housekeeper's fury. By the time you awaken, at 7:30, Mary has already been labouring for 3 hours. She started 15 fires across the house, assisted with breakfast preparation, disposed of chamber pots. Yes, that's precisely what it implies. And cleaned the entrance steps, all before you've opened your eyelids. I studied a journal from a scullery maid who served in London in the 1860s. She documented labouring 119 hours in a single week. For reference, a contemporary full-time position is 40 hours. And her palms were so damaged from cleaning that she bound them in cloth at night to prevent staining her bedding with blood. Now it's approaching time to prepare for Lady Montgomery's tea. Your mother calls you to her parlour for final directions. Every detail matters how. Many instances you may refuse a cake before accepting precisely once which seat to occupy. Never the most comfortable one, but also not the least appealing. How to grasp your teacup by the handle, never cradling it with both palms. And remember, your mother states, adjusting the brooch at her neck, Lady Montgomery's son will be arriving from Oxford next week. He'll attend the Horrocks dinner on Friday. There it is. The actual objective of today's gathering. This isn't simply tea, it's intelligence gathering. Your mother intends to obtain information about the young gentleman, his pursuits, his future. Because you're 21 now, and in Victorian England that's perilously near to spinsterhood. Your lady's maid assists you changing into your calling dress, the blue one, thankfully, and attaches a small hat to your intricately arranged hair. Gloves are mandatory. No decent woman would appear bare-handed in society. Your mother examines you sharply before nodding her consent. The carriage journey to Lady Montgomery's Belgravia residence takes 20 minutes. You sit stiffly, cautious not to crease your dress. Your mother utilises this time to remind you of crucial points. Remember, Eleanor, smile agreeably, but not overly. Never dispute, even if you understand something to be wrong. Display interest in others' perspectives without sharing too many of your own. In your head you're considering, so essentially be a decorative doll with no opinions. But you respond, yes, mother, because that's what's required. When we reach Lady Montgomery's townhouse, a butler receives us at the entrance. Your mother presents him her calling card. A vital social instrument, these tiny cards were your Victorian social media identity. Everything from the paper's quality to the engraving's style broadcast your position. The parlour is already packed with ladies in refined afternoon attire. The atmosphere is thick with perfume. Perfume and the subdued sounds of proper dialogue. No politics, no faith, no financial talk. These subjects were absolutely prohibited in mixed gatherings. Lady Montgomery, an imposing woman in her 60s, sits like royalty, presiding over court. You mirror your mother's approach, approaching her initially and curtsying before she offers her hand. "Miss Eleanor," she states, her gaze rapidly evaluating everything from your gown to your bearing. "How delightful to see you again." You whisper the proper reply, feeling like you're navigating a tightrope. One misstep and you tumble from social favour. And just as you assume your seat, the parlour door swings open again. The butler declares new guests. Mr. and Mrs. Harwick, Miss Harwick and Mr. James Harwick. The room imperceptibly shifts. Mr. James Harwick wasn't anticipated. He wasn't meant to return from Oxford until the following week. Your mother's eyes expand slightly, the sole sign of her shock. The young gentleman who enters following his parents is tall, with the assured demeanour of someone born to status. As he surveys the room, his gaze encounters yours momentarily, and suddenly all those absurd rules, the corseting, the superficial conversation, the strategic social gatherings have a meaning. Because in Victorian England, this is how the contest is conducted, and the consequences couldn't be more serious. The contest of social survival is about to commence in truth. The participants are positioned, the regulations established though invisible to outsiders, and you're required to perform flawlessly, even though nobody has ever clarified all the regulations. How much of your authentic self will you relinquish to succeed? And what occurs if you fail? Unlike you, secure in your comfortable bed, with the liberty to be whoever you select tomorrow, the young Victorian woman had no such privilege, her entire destiny balanced on the razor's edge of decorum. As the tea is distributed in fragile porcelain cups, you're mindful to stir without clanking the spoon against the edges, a grave error in Victorian etiquette. You take a small cake after refusing once, never, accept instantly. It seems voracious, and all the while you're intensely conscious of Mr. Harwick's presence across the space. The afternoon continues, a deliberately arranged dance of hollow pleasantries and critically important social positioning. By the time we depart, your face hurts from sustaining a pleasant demeanour, and your ribs pulse from the corset. But there's a hint of something fresh. Perhaps the contest is worth participating in after all. If Mr. Harwick persists in stealing looks your direction throughout the afternoon as the carriage transports us home, your mother is already strategizing the following move in this complex social chess game. Tomorrow will introduce fresh regulations, fresh obstacles, fresh chances to ascend or descend in society's judgment. And as the sun descends over London, projecting elongated shadows across the cobblestone avenues, servants are readying for evening responsibilities while their masters prepare for dinner gatherings and social visits. The unseen apparatus of Victorian society maintains its unrelenting motion, driven by rigid rules, inflexible hierarchies, and the perpetual dread of committing a catastrophic social blunder. Speaking of individuals who didn't possess the privilege of selection, let's backtrack to 4:30 that identical morning. While Eleanor won't open her eyelids for another 3 hours, the household apparatus that enables her existence is already churning into action. The garret is completely black and freezing, so frigid you can witness your breath suspended in the atmosphere like phantom murmurs. Jane, Eleanor's lady's maid, rouses with a start at the sound of a tiny bell, no gentle sunrise awakening. Just the severe ring of the housekeeper's handbell slicing through the darkness. Jane occupies this confined space with 3 other female servants. Their beds are squeezed together beneath the rafters where the ceiling angles so sharply she can't stand fully upright. In summer, this room transforms into a furnace. In winter, it's scarcely warmer than the avenue outside. Frost crystals have developed on the interior of the tiny window. Look, I've genuinely slept in a restored Victorian servants' accommodation during my investigation. Even with contemporary underfloor warming secretly added, it was wretched. The original servants didn't even possess proper mattresses, just hay-filled ticking that crackled with every shift. Jane dresses rapidly in the darkness, her digits frozen from cold. No basin of heated water awaits her. Instead, she shatters the ice in the pitcher with her knuckles and splashes the icy water on her face. The jolt startles her completely awake. Her uniform, a simple black gown with white collar and cuffs, dangles from a spike on the wall. It's the identical one she wore yesterday and the day preceding. She possesses two uniforms altogether, laundering one while donning the other. The gown is carefully repaired, but worn thin in areas. Still, it must be spotless. Any mark or wrinkle will receive a reprimand from Mrs. Phillips, the housekeeper. "Mary's tardy again," murmurs Annie, the kitchen maid who sleeps adjacent to Jane. "Mrs. Phillips will punish her severely. She was awake past midnight, buffing silver," Jane murmurs back, fastening her boots with practiced efficiency. Poor child, exhausted beyond measure. 8. Mary, the scullery maid, is merely 13. She arrived from the workhouse 6 months prior, and the continuous labour has sunken her cheeks and coarsened her hands. But she's still among the fortunate ones. Many workhouse children wound up in factories or coal mines. Seriously, I examined employment documents from this era. Children as young as 8 were labouring 16-hour shifts. The Victorians maintained this peculiar contradictory view of childhood. They idealised it in literature while concurrently working children nearly to death. Make it make sense. The bell chimes again, more urgently. Jane and Annie swap glances before heading downstairs, cautious to step silently on the servants' stairway. This cramped, spiralling stairwell runs beyond the walls of the principal house, one of numerous architectural elements designed to maintain servants invisible. When the family travels through their refined corridors, they never observe the cramped passages where servants hurry like rodents in the walls. The entire arrangement is designed so dirty. Labour remains concealed, producing the illusion that aristocratic homes magically maintain themselves. The kitchen is the pulsing core of the house, and at this hour it's the sole truly heated location. Cook is already present, her massive arms submerged in bread dough. The flame in the cast-iron range blazes, prepared for the day's continuous cooking. "You're to ignite the fires in the morning room and dining room initially," Cook states without glancing up. "Then Lady Eleanor's room?" "His lordship desires the study fire started early today. He has letters before breakfast. No good morning? No courtesies?" In the service realm, productivity supersedes niceties. The household operates on a strict schedule, and every moment matters. Jane seizes a scuttle of coal and proceeds upstairs with Annie. They navigate through the quiet house like spectres, igniting fires in each specified room. The coal powder adheres to Jane's hands and face, but she can't materialise before the family appearing dirty. She'll need to cleanse again before rousing Eleanor. "Have you learned?" Annie murmurs as they kneel before the dining room fireplace. "Mr. Howick's son is returned from Oxford. They claim he's attending Lady Montgomery's tea today." "How do you understand that?" Jane inquires, meticulously arranging kindling. Annie smirks. Mr. Phillips overheard it from Lord Hartley's valet, who overheard it from Lady Harwick's maid. This precisely here is the Victorian servant intelligence system. While the aristocrats maintained their official information channels, servants maintained their own shadow network. They exchanged rumours and information across households, understanding everything before their employers discovered. They were the original social media, just with more coal powder and less endless scrolling. Ms. Eleanor's mother will be frantic, Jane states. She's been pursuing a suitable match for months. The possibility of Eleanor marrying genuinely fills Jane with mixed feelings. She's truly attached to her young mistress, who handles her more compassionately than most. But if Eleanor weds, Jane might lose her position, or worse, need to relocate if Eleanor transfers to her husband's property. For servants, employment security was never assured. You could be terminated without reference for transgressions as trivial as shattering a teacup or speaking out of place. Without a reference, securing new employment was virtually impossible. Many former servants ended up in prostitution or the workhouse when they lost their positions. By 6:30, Jane has started 7 fires, assisted with breakfast preparation trays, and finally scrubbed the coal powder from her hands and face. She switches her soiled apron for a fresh one before proceeding to Eleanor's room. Along the way, she encounters Mr. Phillips, the butler, examining the footman before they commence their responsibilities. The male servants constitute another branch of the household hierarchy completely. At the summit stands Mr. Phillips, perfectly straight, flawlessly dressed, the absolute authority over the male personnel. Beneath him are the footmen, selected particularly for their stature and attractive appearance. These men are basically the Rolex watches of the Victorian period, status symbols that affluent families showcase, prominently matching footmen exceeding 6 feet tall, ultimate aristocratic flex. Some families even compensated taller footmen superior wages, which is fundamentally the 1860s version of spending additional for the premium smartphone. The footmen don powdered wigs and ornate livery in the family shades. Their responsibilities include declaring visitors, serving meals, transporting heavy objects, and generally appearing impressive. They receive more than female servants despite performing less genuine work, a reality that doesn't escape the women's awareness. "Jane," Mr. Phillips states with a brief nod as she passes. Though they're both senior servants, the butler outranks even the housekeeper. "His directive is absolute, Mr. Phillips," she responds with suitable deference. "Every exchange between servants adheres to strict protocols. Even in the servants' hall they don't utilise first names. It's always Mr. Phillips and Mrs. Phillips. Even though the housekeeper isn't genuinely married, Mrs. is merely her designation of respect. Younger servants are addressed by their surnames exclusively. When Jane enters Eleanor's bedroom, she moves soundlessly, positioning the warm water basin on the washstand before pulling the drapes. The room is bitter cold despite the recently started fire. She stands for an instant observing Eleanor sleep, conscious of how dissimilar their existences are, despite being comparable in age. "Good morning, miss," she murmurs quietly, the identical greeting she's employed every morning for 3 years. As Eleanor commences her day, Jane is already into her 3rd hour of labour when she assists Eleanor dress. Her own spine aches from hauling coal and her eyes sting from insufficient sleep, but her hands stay gentle, her manner composed and proficient. "The blue gown or the green for today?" Eleanor inquires. Jane understands this isn't merely about colour choice. Every aspect of appearance conveys social meaning. She's mastered navigating these waters cautiously. "The blue, miss," she states after a moment's deliberation. "Lady Montgomery remarked last week that green brings illness to mind." Eleanor nods, accepting Jane's judgment in these situations. This is where Jane discovers small instances of authority. Her understanding of the social realm makes her invaluable. The aristocrats may possess wealth and position, but servants possess information and proximity. I discovered this intriguing letter from a lady's maid in the 1870s who documented, "I comprehend more about my mistress than her own husband comprehends. I attend her wounds, both physical and emotional. I understand which corset conceals which secret. In certain ways she belongs more to me than to him." Him? Talk about complicated authority dynamics. The process of dressing Eleanor is exhausting. Jane's hands labour systematically through each layer: chemise, drawers, corset, petticoats, gown, while her mind catalogues the day's remaining tasks. After assisting Eleanor dress, she'll require to tidy the bedroom, dispose of the chamber pot, refresh the linens, repair any damaged clothing, and prepare Eleanor's evening gown. Then there's Lady Hartley's tea to ready for. As Jane compresses Eleanor's corset, she's cautious not to pull too harshly. Some ladies' maids take satisfaction in achieving the tiniest possible waist for their mistresses, regardless of ease. Jane has witnessed girls collapse from restrictive lacing and understands the long-term harm it inflicts. "A bit more, miss?" she inquires, though she can already observe Eleanor struggling to respire. "Yes," Eleanor wheezes. "Lady Montgomery will observe if I'm not adequately constricted." Jane obeys, experiencing a pang of remorse. This is the paradox of her role. She tends for Eleanor while simultaneously participating in her physical confinement. Once Eleanor is attired and her hair styled, Jane will possess a quick moment to consume her own breakfast before commencing the day's tidying. Servants' meals are consumed in the servants' hall, overseen by Mr. and Mrs. Phillips. The servants' hall sits in the cellar, a bare room with a lengthy wooden table. The seating configuration strictly adheres to rank. Mr. Phillips sits at the head, Mrs. Phillips at the foot. The superior ranking servants, lady's maid, valet, cooks positioned closest to them, while the inferior servants, scullery maids, hall boys, gather at the middle. Jane assumes her place near Mrs. Phillips, a location that demonstrates her status as lady's maid. The breakfast is plain but substantial: porridge, bread and robust tea. Unlike the lavish spread distributed upstairs, servants' food is fundamental fuel for the day's exertion. "You'll require to ready Ms. Eleanor's evening gown for the Wilkinsons' dinner tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Mrs. Phillips states to Jane between mouthfuls. "And Lady Hartley has requested additional hands for this afternoon's tea. You and Sarah will support their personnel. Nobody complains or objects. Though this signifies an even longer day than typical, servants don't possess the privilege of displaying annoyance. Oh, and hear this. Victorian servants customarily laboured 16 to 18-hour days, but they were required to appear cheerful the whole time. One household guide literally declares, 'A servant with a bitter countenance renders harm to the household climate.' Essentially, smile while you're being worked to exhaustion or you're dismissed. The dialogue at breakfast is subdued and functional, focused wholly on the day's labour. Personal issues have no position here. Even friendships between servants must be maintained, with constraint. Romance between servants could result in instant dismissal. Vessel. This reminds me of these absurd regulations I discovered in a Victorian household guide. One genuinely stated, "No followers permitted." Translation servants weren't allowed to receive visitors, romantic or otherwise. Your complete social existence occurred within those walls, with the identical handful of individuals for years continuously. Talk about suffocating. Following breakfast, Jane returns upstairs to tidy Eleanor's room. Once she's descended to breakfast, the bed must be arranged, the fire maintained, the chamber pot disposed of and cleaned. Any abandoned clothing requires to be inspected for repairs. As she removes the bed linens, Jane overhears Mrs. Hartley's voice from the corridor, directing the housekeeper about the day's preparations. The mentions of Lady Montgomery's tea and Mr. Hurrick's son validates Annie's earlier gossip. Jane grins to herself. By this evening, every servant in 5 adjacent households will understand precisely what transpired at Lady Montgomery's tea, including details the family believes private. It's one of the limited benefits of invisibility. You observe and overhear everything when individuals forget you're present. Mid-morning discovers Jane in the laundry space, repairing a tear in one of Eleanor's petticoats. The laundry space is heated and humid, saturated with the severe smell of caustic soap. 2 housemaids are washing linens in large copper vessels, their hands crimson and weathered. Has anyone spotted Mary? Mrs. Phillips materializes in the entrance, her expression severe. She was meant to buff the silver an hour past. Go. The housemaids swap nervous looks but say nothing. Jane concentrates intensely on her stitching. If you're shielding for her again, Mrs. Phillips starts but halts as Mary materializes behind her, appearing pale and depleted. I'm sorry, Mrs. Phillips, Mary states, her voice scarcely audible. I was assisting cook with the bread shipment. Mrs. Phillips constricts her eyes, obviously not accepting this explanation. The silver won't buff itself, girl. Proceed to it right away. Right away. Mary nods and rushes away, but not before Jane observes her wavering slightly on her feet. That child's not healthy, Jane states. Once Mrs. Phillips has departed, she'll be returned to the workhouse, if she can't maintain pace. One of the housemaids responds factually, and that's the harsh reality. Sickness isn't an explanation for servants. There are no sick days, no holiday. You labour through fever, discomfort, exhaustion, or you forfeit your role. Mary's options to service are grim. The workhouse, the avenues, or perhaps a factory where circumstances are even harsher. I discovered medical documents from London hospitals in this period that revealed servant girls with chronic respiratory ailments from sleeping in damp garrets, permanent spine damage from hauling heavy loads, and chemical burns from cleaning substances. The physical cost was harsh. By midday, the house hums with motion in readiness for the afternoon. Eleanor and her mother have departed for morning visits, a vital part of the social circuit. They'll return for a light luncheon before changing for Lady Montgomery's tea. Jane seizes their time away to freshen Eleanor's evening gowns and inspect them for needed mending. While she works, she glances through the window as the carriage pulls up, delivering Eleanor and her mother back home. Moments later, the bell in Eleanor's chamber chimes, the call for Jane to attend her lady. She rushes upstairs, where Eleanor is already peeling off her gloves. Jane, I must change right away, Eleanor declares, her tone tight with anticipation. Mother insists we reach Lady Montgomery's exactly at 3. While Jane assists Eleanor into her tea gown, the blue one naturally, she detects her mistress's flushed cheeks and anxious manner. Is all well, miss? Jane inquires, fastening a hairpin. Eleanor catches her gaze in the looking-glass. There's an instant of real understanding between them, uncommon in this strictly layered society. Mr. Howick's boy has returned from Oxford, Eleanor reveals. He'll be at Lady Montgomery's this afternoon, Mother claims. Claims. Well, forget what Mother claims, Jane acknowledges, grasping completely. The marriage season is fully underway, and Eleanor is the commodity being presented despite all her advantages. Eleanor's destiny is scarcely hers to decide. The blue enhances your eyes, miss, Jane comments, smoothing the drop of the hem. Quite flattering. It's the nearest she can manage to showing encouragement. When Eleanor and her mother leave for the tea, the household transitions into a different tempo. With the family gone, servants steal brief respites between chores. The cook prepares supper, while housemaids shine silver and wipe figurines. Footmen buff boots and groom the master's garments. Jane employs this interval to ready Eleanor's belongings for the night and the next day. As she labours, she permits herself to consider her own prospects. At 23, she's already deemed middle-aged in service years. Ladies' maids can function well into their 40s if they're talented, but eventually their vision deteriorates or their hands become too stiff for delicate stitching. What afterward? Jane has succeeded in saving a modest sum from her earnings, £7 over 3 years, concealed in a tin container under her sleeping mat. Insufficient to retire on, certainly inadequate to establish the small millinery shop she occasionally imagines. The most she can realistically anticipate is to stay with Eleanor if she weds advantageously, or possibly advance to head housekeeper in her later years. The alternative, termination without recommendation or becoming too disabled to labour, leads unavoidably to the poorhouse. This, as well, is a form of invisible prison, distinct from Eleanor's, but equally restrictive. Late afternoon sunlight angles through the pane as Jane completes organising Eleanor's evening attire. The residence is silent except for the remote sounds of cook clanging cookware in the kitchen and a footman buffing brass in the corridor. Shortly, the family will arrive and the evening mechanism will start grinding into action. Supper to be presented, garments to be switched, hearths to be tended. The unending cycle of service proceeds without interruption. Jane grants herself one brief instant of repose, sitting on the window bench in Eleanor's chamber, something she'd never attempt if the family were present. From this spot, she can observe the avenue below, where people travel freely about their affairs. A young pair walks linked together, chuckling at some private amusement. A delivery lad whistles while he propels his wagon. Even the street cleaner, despite all his destitution, can finish his shift and venture where he wishes. Jane brushes the cold glass, the apparent boundary between her realm and theirs. Then the faraway noise of carriage wheels warns her that the family is approaching. She stands swiftly, straightening her apron and resuming her appropriate stance. Her instant of repose has ended. The invisible woman must get back to duties. When Eleanor bursts into the chamber 30 minutes afterward, her face is crimson with enthusiasm. Declaration. Jane instantly realises the tea was successful. "Jane!" Eleanor cries out, uncommonly lively. "You'll never guess what occurred at Lady Montgomery's." As Jane assists removing Eleanor's hat and gloves, Eleanor recounts her exchange with Mr. James Howick in thorough detail. How he inquired about her fondness for music, how he praised her blue gown, how he referenced attending the Wilkinsons' supper tomorrow evening. Jane listens carefully while filing away every particular. This intelligence is precious currency in the servants' quarters. Mother is overwhelmed. Eleanor confesses as Jane releases her corset, permitting her to inhale freely for the first instance all afternoon. "She's already scheming what I should don tomorrow. The pale rose silk would be beautiful." "Miss," Jane proposes, "I can restore the lace edging tonight." Eleanor grasps Jane's hand spontaneously, an uncommon violation of the divide between lady and servant. "What would I manage without you, Jane?" The inquiry lingers in the atmosphere, both understanding it's more intricate than it seems. Their bond exists within rigid limits, authentic fondness restricted by social positions neither of them established. Afterward, as Jane descends to the servants' quarters for the short supper interval before evening responsibilities, she contemplates Eleanor's elation. In her station, Jane will never witness the courtship customs of the upper ranks. Servants seldom wed, authorization is demanded and frequently refused. Those who do wed typically must depart service. In the servants' quarters, the day's rumours are traded in muted tones. Annie has already discovered about Mr. Howick's focus on Eleanor from one of Lady Montgomery's maids. "They claim he's valued at 10,000 a year," Annie murmurs. "And not unpleasant on the eyes, either." "Excellent for Miss." "Eleanor," Jane responds, though part of her questions what it signifies for her own destiny. The servants' supper is swift and plain, potage made from remaining meat from the family's midday meal, bread and tea. While they consume, Mr. Phillips reminds them of extra responsibilities for tomorrow's arrangements for the Wilkinsons' supper. "It will be a prolonged night tomorrow," he concludes. "Modify your schedules accordingly." Translation: You'll labour even longer hours with no extra payment. As nightfall descends outside, the residence enters its evening stage. Oil lamps are ignited, hearths stoked for the night, beds prepared. The family dines, receives company, withdraws to the parlour for music or games. Throughout it all, servants glide soundlessly, foreseeing requirements, staying invisible unless summoned. Jane assists Eleanor change for supper, then into her sleeping clothes afterward. By the instance, Eleanor is securely settled into bed. It's approaching midnight. Jane's day, nevertheless, is not yet finished. She must still arrange clothes for tomorrow, repair the lace on the rose silk gown, and buff Eleanor's finest shoes. When Jane finally ascends the narrow staircase to the garret shortly past 1 in the morning, she's been conscious and labouring for nearly 21 hours. Her spine throbs, her fingertips are punctured from stitching, and her eyes sting with fatigue. Yet as she drops onto her slim mattress, she recognises she's more fortunate than numerous others. She has a ceiling, consistent meals, and comparative security. She doesn't have to prostitute herself on the avenues or toil in a factory inhaling lint and chemicals all shift. The other maids are already slumbering, their breathing forming a soft rhythm in the shadowy chamber outside. London maintains its nighttime existence, distant from this concealed garret where invisible women temporarily rest before commencing again tomorrow. Jane shuts her eyes, too weary even to strip off her frock. In a few hours the bell will sound, and she'll awaken to ignite hearths, haul coal, warm water, and assist Eleanor chase her matrimonial goals. The social performance continues upstairs and downstairs, each faction executing their assigned movements in an elaborate choreography of rank and obligation. The timepiece strikes 2 in another section of London, and with it an entirely different set of invisible regulations clicks into position while Eleanor readies for her social tea, and Jane manages a dozen silent responsibilities. Across town, in a respectable middle-rank neighbourhood, Mrs. Charlotte Wilson straightens her bonnet in the entrance mirror. Unlike the aristocratic Hartleys with their legion of servants, the Wilsons manage with merely 2, a cook and a maid for everything. Their semi-attached residence in Bloomsbury is pleasant but unpretentious, a physical demonstration of their precarious standing in Victorian society. Too refined for commerce, not prosperous enough for genuine idleness. "Martha," Charlotte summons, "I'm heading to the markets. Please ensure Mr. Wilson's study is cleaned before he arrives from his chambers." Martha, a girl of 16 who accomplishes the labour of what would be 5 distinct servants in the Hartley residence, emerges from the kitchen, wiping her palms on her apron. "Yes, ma'am. Will you return for the midday meal?" "I should expect so," Charlotte answers. "I'm merely visiting Covent Garden and possibly Regent Street." This informal interaction would astonish the Hartleys. Upper-rank ladies seldom converse directly to servants regarding household affairs. That's what housekeepers existed for. But the middle-rank functioned with fewer buffers between mistress and staff, generating a peculiar closeness even within strict hierarchy. I conversed with a historian who concentrates on Victorian middle-rank homes, and she displayed me household ledger books, where you can literally observe the financial unease on every sheet. These families were perpetually computing, perpetually anxious about maintaining appearances without going insolvent. Charlotte steps out onto the avenue, immediately lifting her skirt slightly upward with her right palm. Not sufficient to expose ankle, which would be shocking, but just enough to evade the mire and horse waste that infest London avenues. Even in respectable districts, sanitation is crude by our measures. For Charlotte, today's shopping journey isn't merely about supplies. It's a tightrope stroll of social communication. Every acquisition, every exchange is ruled by the middle rank's most sacred principle: thou shalt seem more affluent than thou art. Her initial destination is the baker's establishment. The chime tinkles as she enters, and Mrs. Parker, the baker's spouse, acknowledges her with suitable deference. "Good morning, Mrs. Wilson. The customary order today?" Charlotte wavers. Her spouse Thomas's law office has been sluggish this month and savings are necessary. But reducing back on quality bread would broadcast financial difficulty to the district. "Yes, the customary," she concludes, "and possibly one of those petite seed cakes as well." The seed cake is an unnecessary expenditure, but it permits Charlotte to display affluence while actually purchasing less than last week. This persistent computation, what to scrimp on, what to splurge on for appearance's benefit, is the draining mental arithmetic of middle-rank Victorian existence. Wait, you know what I discover astonishing? The The typical middle-rank Victorian woman expended approximately 25% of her household funds on sustaining appearances. Consider that. A quarter of everything they possessed went not to ease or safety, but to appearing the role. It was literally placing food funds into status emblems. As Charlotte settles, she's cautious to extract her coins from a refined purse, not the cheaper coin pouch she actually favours. The execution of gentility never ceases. Next is the butcher's establishment, where the genuine rank navigation commences. As Charlotte nears, she observes two women already at the counter, one plainly a cook from a prosperous household, the other a labouring rank housewife purchasing cheap portions. The timing generates a predicament. If Charlotte enters presently, the butcher will be compelled to select whose order to handle first. Social protocol dictates he assist the representative from the wealthier household initially, but that would signify either the cook or Charlotte, depending on whose employer possesses higher standing. These micro instances of rank negotiation occur dozens of times daily. Who yields on the pavement? Who is assisted first? Who speaks initially? Every exchange is a subtle reinforcement of the invisible hierarchies that direct Victorian existence. Charlotte hesitates, feigning to adjust her glove until the labouring rank woman completes her acquisition. This permits her to dodge the awkward negotiation entirely. Such tactical delays are vital abilities for middle-rank Victorians navigating social currents. Inside, the butcher acknowledges her with a deferential Mrs. Wilson while completing the cook's considerable order, plainly for a household far wealthier than Charlotte's. "Just a modest roast today, Mr. Simmons," Charlotte states when her opportunity arrives. "And perhaps some stewing beef for tomorrow." The butcher lifts an eyebrow slightly. This is less than her typical order, another indication of the Wilsons' tightening finances. But Charlotte instantly adds, "We're dining at the Hendersons this evening, you understand," fabricating a socially permissible justification for the diminished acquisition. This is quintessential middle-rank tactic. When economizing is required, attribute it to social commitments. Commitments better to be considered occupied than impoverished. As Mr. Simmons packages her meat in paper, Charlotte nonchalantly inquires, "I don't imagine you've discovered anything about the Howicks." "I comprehend their son has returned from Oxford." The butcher's expression illuminates with the universal look of someone with rumours to distribute. "Indeed, ma'am. My lad delivers to their cook, and word is the young Mr. Howick was at Lady Montgomery's tea yesterday." Displaying particular consideration to the Hartley girl, Charlotte acknowledges thoughtfully, "How intriguing." This transaction exemplifies another middle-rank survival talent, intelligence collection. Without entrance to the aristocratic social circuit, middle-rank Victorians depended on servants, merchants, and church associations to remain informed about social movements above their station. Intelligence was authority, especially for families like the Wilsons with marriageable daughters. 17-year-old Emily Wilson wouldn't be contemplated for someone of James Howick's standing, but the ripple consequences of aristocratic marriages frequently generated possibilities further down the social hierarchy. I encountered these captivating middle-rank matchmaking manuals from the 1860s. They fundamentally instructed parents how to utilize high society marriages to enhance their own children's prospects. Like social connecting, but with wedding bands and enormous property exchanges. With her acquisitions secured, Charlotte proceeds to Covent Garden Market, the bustling centre of London commerce where all ranks unavoidably collide. The market is a sensory bombardment. Vendors shouting their merchandise, the odour of fresh produce blending with horse waste, pickpockets and society ladies traversing the same congested passages. Here the meticulously separated realms of Victorian London temporarily merge. Charlotte travels purposefully, disregarding the fishmongers and lower-rank food booths. As a respectable middle-rank woman, she purchases certain items personally, but assigns the acquiring of coarse foods, like fish, to her maid. Heaven forbid someone of her station be witnessed haggling over mackerel. As she chooses vegetables from a farmer's booth, a disturbance erupts nearby. A well-attired gentleman is charging a tattered boy of pilfering his handkerchief. The boy, no more than 10, contests his innocence while the man clutches his collar. The throng divides slightly, forming the instinctive separation that happens whenever cross-rank conflict erupts. Charlotte glances away as protocol demands. Public quarrels are to be disregarded by the refined, particularly those involving the lower ranks. But as she rotates, she accidentally establishes eye contact with a finely attired woman. Watching the scene. With a jolt, Charlotte identifies Mrs. Hartley, Eleanor's mother, accompanied by a maid transporting her acquisitions. This chance meeting presents both prospect and peril. The Wilsons and Hartleys inhabit entirely separate social spheres. Under ordinary circumstances, Mrs. Hartley would possess no reason to recognise Charlotte, whose spouse is merely a moderately accomplished solicitor. But they share a fragile association. Charlotte's spouse has managed some minor legal affairs for Mrs. Hartley's brother years earlier. Is this adequate for Charlotte to extend a greeting? If she recognises Mrs. Hartley and is rebuffed, the mortification would be considerable. If she doesn't recognise her and Mrs. Hartley anticipates it, she seems presumptuous. These split-second social computations were the constant mental burden of Victorian middle-rank women. One incorrect manoeuvre could seal doors or generate lasting embarrassment. Charlotte selects the middle course, a slight acknowledgement. Nothing so bold as a greeting, but adequate to be recognised if Mrs. Hartley elects. To her astonishment, Mrs. Hartley approaches. "Mrs. Wilson, isn't it? Thomas Wilson's spouse?" Charlotte curtsies slightly. "Yes, indeed, Mrs. Hartley. How delightful to encounter you. You must convey my regards to your spouse. My brother speaks admiringly of his legal guidance. This public recognition is social currency, more precious than anything Charlotte could acquire in the market. Being observed conversing with Mrs. Hartley elevates her standing instantly. Thank you. I certainly shall. I comprehend congratulations may shortly be in sequence for your daughter." Mrs. Hartley's eyebrows lift slightly at this boldness, but she merely states, "Nothing is confirmed, of course, though we maintain hopes." The transaction lasts less than a minute, but its consequences will ripple through Charlotte's social standing for weeks. As Mrs. Hartley proceeds on, followed by her silent maid, Charlotte permits herself a small satisfaction. This chance meeting can be utilised in a dozen subtle methods. The Victorian middle rank were experts at this challenge, forming associations, maximising chance meetings, stretching small benefits into larger ones. Without inherited prosperity or station, social advancement demanded constant watchfulness and opportunism. You think networking gatherings today are demanding. Imagine your entire family's destiny depending on whether you accurately decipher the significance behind someone's acknowledgement at the vegetable booth. That was everyday existence for the Victorian middle rank. Charlotte finishes her shopping with a renewed vitality. The meeting with Mrs. Hartley has enhanced her day immeasurably. As she turns toward residence, she nearly crashes with a gentleman rounding the corner. "I do beg your forgiveness," she begins, then halts abruptly. It's James Howick himself, accompanied by another young man. "Entirely my fault, madam," he states courteously, tipping his hat before proceeding on. He doesn't identify her, naturally. They've never been formally presented, but Charlotte has observed him at church and recognises his face well. This second encounter with the Howick-Hartley association feels almost like destiny. By the instant Charlotte arrives home, her mind is racing with possibilities. If the Hartleys and Howicks do establish an alliance through marriage, perhaps the association could somehow advantage Emily. At the very least, Mrs. Hartley's recognition can be referenced casually in discussion at the Hendersons' supper tonight. The middle-rank social challenge demands exploiting every small benefit. Martha accepts the parcels as Charlotte removes her bonnet in the entrance. "Did you have a pleasant morning, ma'am?" "Most enlightening," Charlotte responds. "Is Miss Emily back from her music lesson?" "Yes, ma'am. She's in the parlour practising her scales." The reference to music lessons highlights another aspect of middle-rank Victorian existence, the constant investment in marriageability. Despite their tight finances, the Wilsons compensate for Emily's piano instruction, drawing lessons, and French tutor. These accomplishments are essential capital in the marriage market. Unlike aristocratic girls, middle-rank daughters couldn't depend on family designation or fortune to secure spouses. Instead, they needed to exhibit the refined abilities that signalled their worthiness to marry into equal or elevated standing. Charlotte discovers Emily at the piano, dutifully practising despite plainly having modest musical talent. The girl glances up hopefully as her mother enters. "Any intriguing news from your shopping, mother?" The inquiry isn't innocent. Emily, like all Victorian daughters, comprehends her destiny depends on favourable marriage prospects. Any social intelligence is potentially relevant to her opportunities. "As a matter of fact," Charlotte states, occupying a seat on the sofa, "I met Mrs. Hartley at the market. She was quite amiable." Emily's eyes expand. The Hartleys are far above their social circle. Charlotte continues, savouring the moment. "I nearly crashed with young Mr. Howick himself." "James Howick, the one everyone claims will propose to Eleanor Hartley?" Charlotte acknowledges. "The very same, though nothing is confirmed yet, according to Mrs. Hartley." Emily processes this intelligence. At 17, she's already well versed in the mathematics of social benefit. If he weds Miss Hartley and we possess a connection to Mrs. Hartley through Uncle William. "Precisely," Charlotte states. "It's a distant association, but associations are currency, my dear. This discussion would never transpire in an aristocratic household where marriages were orchestrated through direct negotiation between families. The middle rank has had to be more inventive, seeking indirect routes to advantageous matches." The front entrance opens, indicating Thomas Wilson's arrival for the midday meal. Charlotte rises, smoothing her frock. "Not a syllable to your father yet," she cautions Emily. "Let me discover the right moment to reference it." Thomas Wilson enters the parlour, a man whose appearance perfectly reflects his middle-rank standing. His garments are good quality but not stylish, his manner dignified but lacking aristocratic ease. He carries the weight of being the family's sole financial support visibly in his bearing. "Charlotte, Emily," he acknowledges them, kissing his spouse's cheek. "Any news today?" "Nothing of importance," Charlotte responds, temporarily retaining her social victories to herself. The midday meal should be ready momentarily. As they relocate to the dining chamber, the contrast with the Hartleys' residence is stark. Instead of a butler and footman, Martha presents the meal herself. The food is good but simple: cold meat from yesterday's roast, bread, cheese, and a vegetable potage. "I've invited the Henderson's son to supper next week," Thomas mentions as they consume. "He's performing well at his father's shipping enterprise, quite promising. The purpose of this invitation is transparent. Robert Henderson is a suitable match for Emily, not thrilling or wealthy, but solid and respectable." Middle-rank marriages were primarily practical alliances, combining modest resources to maintain or slightly enhance social station. Charlotte acknowledges approvingly while cataloguing the extra expenditure this supper will demand. They'll need to present wine and a proper 3 courses. Martha will need assistance. Perhaps the cook's niece can be employed for the evening. These computations never cease. "That reminds me," she states, seizing the opportunity. "I met Mrs. Hartley at the market today. She requested me to convey her regards to you. Apparently her brother speaks admiringly of your legal assistance." Thomas glances up, astonished and pleased. "Did she indeed? Most gracious of her. This is how the middle rank challenge is executed. Casual references to upper rank associations, strategic flattery, careful positioning. Every social exchange is an opportunity to reinforce or enhance standing. After the midday meal, Thomas returns to his chambers. Emily resumes her piano practice, and Charlotte withdraws to her small writing desk to examine household ledgers. This private moment reveals the truth behind the carefully sustained facade. The Wilsons are struggling financially. Thomas's law office is respectable but not profitable. Educating their son at a decent school consumes much of their income. Maintaining even 2 servants stretches their budget. Yet diminishing their standard of living would have catastrophic social repercussions. Charlotte stares at the columns of figures, searching for places to economize that won't be apparent to others. This is the concealed reality of middle-rank Victorian existence, genteel destitution masked behind a veneer of respectability. Perhaps the cook can prepare pottage more frequently. Perhaps Charlotte's frock for the Henderson supper can be refurbished rather than replaced. Small sacrifices to maintain the essential appearance of affluence. You know what devastates me about this era? They'd literally starve before they'd abandon appearances. There are accounts of middle-rank families who retained a servant they couldn't afford while consuming only bread themselves because not having a servant would expose their financial struggles. The execution was everything. As Charlotte labours, Martha appears at the entrance. "Excuse me, ma'am, Mrs. Porter has arrived to call." Harriet Porter is Charlotte's closest friend and another middle-rank spouse, navigating similar circumstances. Charlotte swiftly puts away the ledger book. Financial particulars were never discussed, even with friends, and relocates to the parlour to receive her visitor. The ritual of afternoon calls was as important to the middle rank as to the aristocracy. Though informal, these gatherings sustained social networks and facilitated essential information exchange masked as casual conversation. "Harriet, what a delight to see you." Charlotte welcomes her friend as Martha ushers her inside. The 2 women trade customary courtesies before Harriet leans in with that universal look of someone bearing delicious gossip. "Have you heard about the Hartwicks? Their son returned from Oxford, and apparently he's taken an interest in Eleanor Hunter Hartley." Charlotte smiles, relishing the uncommon pleasure of knowing first. "Actually, I ran into Mrs. Hartley at the market this morning. She was quite receptive." Harriet's eyes widen on cue. "Did she discuss the match?" "She mentioned nothing's confirmed, but they're optimistic." This information trade continues, each woman sharing social intelligence valuable to the other. Which families are ascending or declining in fortune? Which young men are deemed suitable? Which merchants are offering credit too freely? For middle-class Victorian women, these exchanges weren't meaningless gossip, but vital strategic planning. Without inherited standing or guaranteed income, social survival required accurately interpreting the perpetually shifting terrain of connections and possibilities. While they converse, Charlotte pours tea. Not the lavish presentation of an aristocratic residence, but a proper serving of tea and seed cake. The standard of these offerings gets observed and assessed, another measurement in the intricate social mathematics. Robert Henderson joins us for dinner next week. Charlotte mentions casually establishing her daughter's matrimonial prospects. Thomas regards him highly. Harriet nods with approval. A practical arrangement. His father's enterprise is flourishing, from what I understand. The implicit message is unmistakable. Not a thrilling match, not a romantic match, but a wise one that will preserve Emily's standing. For the middle class, passionate love was an indulgence that followed securing financial stability. After Harriet leaves, Charlotte resumes her ledgers with fresh determination. The social intelligence collected today, the link to Mrs. Hartley, the verification of James Harwick's attraction to Eleanor, the favourable assessment of Robert Henderson's circumstances, All constitute potential benefits to be methodically exploited. This defines the middle-class Victorian woman. Genuine labour, administering the family's social standing with identical attention a business manager applies to revenue margins. Every encounter, every transaction, every gesture gets analysed for its possible influence on status and relationships. As afternoon transitions toward dusk, Charlotte readies herself for the Hendersons' dinner gathering. Unlike Eleanor Hartley with her personal maid, Charlotte must manage with Martha's modest help. Her gown is stylish but not recent, her accessories understated but quality pieces. Thomas appears from his study, appearing weary but resolved to present well for middle-class men. These social occasions weren't simply pleasant diversions but necessary business networking. Much of Thomas's clientele originated through social ties. "Prepared, my dear?" he inquires, extending his arm. Charlotte accepts, mentally cataloguing what she understands about each attendee likely present, which subjects to raise or sidestep, how to delicately reference her meeting with Mrs. Hartley without seeming boastful as they enter the hired hansom cab. Not a personal coach like the Hartleys, but appropriate transport for a middle-class pair. Charlotte experiences the recognisable blend of apprehension and resolve that defines her social reality. The Wilson standing is fragile, suspended between proper respectability and monetary insecurity. One failed venture, one departed patron, one social blunder could thrust them downward on the deliberately assembled hierarchy of Victorian society. Still within these limitations, Charlotte has perfected the skill of exploiting restricted advantages. Today's unexpected meetings might produce nothing, or they might generate prospects for Emily's tomorrow. The middle-class contest plays out with reduced stakes than the aristocratic version, but with equal proficiency and calculation. As the cab bounces toward the Hendersons' residence, Charlotte straightens her spine and arranges her expression. The display of middle-class propriety persists, a draining but indispensable dance of impressions and deliberate associations. The social survival contest transitions into its evening segment with altered regulations and fresh possibilities, but the core principle stays constant. In Victorian society, you become who others perceive you to be. Back at Lady Montgomery's refined Belgravia townhouse, the social arena is in complete motion. The drawing room vibrates with precisely controlled female conversation, each phrase a prospective weapon or defence in the continuous battle of status and influence. Eleanor sits positioned on a damask chair, bearing flawless, despite her protesting ribcage. The corset that's been constricting her body since dawn now resembles an instrument of torture as she sustains the calm demeanour expected of a properly raised young lady. Lady Montgomery commands the assembly like a commander evaluating forces. At 63, she endured 4 decades in London society, surviving competitors and amassing the most precious commodity in this realm, power. Her tea table serves as both throne and headquarters. "Miss Hartley," she announces, gesturing Eleanor with a decorated hand. "Come beside me and describe your music. I gather you perform the pianoforte quite competently." The summons is simultaneously privilege and examination. Being called to Lady Montgomery's inner circle positions Eleanor in the limelight. Every other woman present will scrutinise her execution, assessing her merit for this enhanced recognition. I devoted weeks investigating Victorian women's personal letters just to comprehend these social mechanics. The mental combat in these drawing rooms exceeded anything in contemporary business settings. Existences were genuinely ruined over refreshments. "You're too generous, Lady Montgomery," Eleanor responds, advancing smoothly to the designated seat. "I train persistently, though I could never match your daughter's celebrated talent." This represents the proper answer, humble regarding her own achievements while praising Lady Montgomery's family. Open self-promotion would be crude, while neglecting to recognise her hostess's door would appear ignorant or rude. the elder woman acknowledges faintly. The initial test succeeded. And what's your impression of Signor Verdi's recent composition? I discovered it overly sentimental, though fashionably so. This harmless-sounding inquiry is essentially a snare. Eleanor doesn't especially appreciate Verdi, but she recognises Lady Montgomery's nephew is an enthusiastic supporter of the composer. Artistic views were never simply individual tastes in Victorian society. They were political declarations, positions that affiliated you with particular factions. Eleanor handles this danger with rehearsed expertise. It contains a certain fervent character that resonates with contemporary attitudes. Though I admit I frequently find myself revisiting Mozart for his precision of statement. Flawless. She's recognised the popular stance without completely embracing it, while suggesting her own preference gravitates toward the more established conservative, which coincidentally matches Lady Montgomery's documented preferences. Lady Montgomery's narrow lips bend slightly. Exactly so. Youth naturally gravitates to passionate extravagances, but experience values classical moderation. From across the space, Eleanor perceives her mother's satisfied expression. Another conflict, expertly handled. This dialogue might appear insignificant, but imagine your complete destiny, who you'll wed, where you'll reside, your economic protection, your offspring's opportunities, depending on whether you voice the correct view about an opera. That represented the truth for Victorian women of Eleanor's station. The drawing room itself functions as a performance venue for these displays. Every component is deliberately positioned. Furniture that quietly suggests status rankings, tables arranged to establish intimate clusters, discussion groups for preferred guests while marginalizing others, illumination crafted to enhance certain features while rendering others in less attractive light. Even the arrangement of the tea service is intentional. Lady Montgomery can monitor every exchange while managing access to provisions in Victorian society, quite literally deciding who receives refreshment and who remains wanting. As Eleanor conducts suitable discussion with the women in Lady Montgomery's privileged circle, her focus stays concentrated on the drawing room doorway. James Harwick and the remaining gentlemen haven't yet materialised, still confined with Lord Montgomery in his study, probably debating politics or commerce subjects deemed inappropriate for ladies. Hold on, let me share something remarkable about Victorian gender isolation. In affluent households, men and women would genuinely spend most of their waking hours in distinct areas. Following dinner, the men would linger at the dining table consuming port, while women retreated to the drawing room. Only subsequently would men accompany the ladies. This spatial division strengthened the concept that the genders functioned in entirely separate domains. Mrs. Pembroke, an infamous gossip with astonishing social endurance, inclines toward Eleanor with a secretive manner. I gather Mr. James Harwick was thoroughly charmed by you at the Wilsons' musicale last season. He requested information about you directly from Lady Winchester. This declaration contains numerous hazards. Is Mrs. Pembroke attempting assistance by distributing useful information? Or endeavouring to make Eleanor seem arrogant by implying she considers herself deserving of James's regard? And citing Lady Winchester suggests Mrs. Pembroke has entry to superior social spheres than Eleanor might have presumed. Eleanor maintains her features pleasantly impassive. How thoughtful of him to recall our momentary introduction. Lady Winchester has always been remarkably kind to everyone. The statement recognises the intelligence without appearing either excessively keen or indifferent, while gently implying that Lady Winchester's consideration isn't as selective as Mrs. Pembroke insinuates. Social deflection and counterattack concealed as agreeable conversation. Mrs. Pembroke's gaze contracts slightly, detecting the adept rebuttal. She prepares to reply when the drawing-room entrance swings open and the butler declares the gentleman's arrival. Lord Montgomery, Mr. Harwick, Mr. James Harwick, and Mr. Pembroke. The environment in the space transforms immediately. Discussions halt, positions adjust imperceptibly. Glances dart toward the newcomers while feigning indifference. The performance of appearing completely relaxed while being acutely vigilant is one every Victorian woman acquired from childhood. Eleanor doesn't glance directly at James, though she's profoundly conscious of his attendance. To display evident fascination would be disastrously inappropriate. Instead, she pursues her discussion with Lady Montgomery's niece, Miss Catherine, while arranging herself to be observable from where the gentlemen are receiving tea. I cannot express how deeply I appreciated the needlework on your handkerchief at services on Sunday, Eleanor tells Catherine, her tone projecting sufficiently to be detected without appearing deliberately amplified. Your talent with needle and fabric surpasses mine completely. Catherine, grasping the strategy perfectly, answers with comparable clarity. You're overly modest, Miss Hartley. Your interpretation of Chopin at the Bennets' function was mentioned for weeks following. They're not genuinely discussing embroidery or musical performance. They're announcing Eleanor's feminine capabilities for James's advantage while preserving the pretense that they're completely unaware of his attendance. Lord Montgomery, a ruddy-complexioned man whose social significance stems exclusively from his wife's manipulation, guides the gentleman into the chamber. Ladies, pardon our tardiness. Professional concerns detained us excessively. We completely comprehend, my lord, Lady Montgomery replies. Gentlemen must handle weighty affairs while we engage ourselves with inconsequential matters. This transaction appears to validate the notion of female superficiality. But detect the delicate mockery in Lady Montgomery's inflection. She's essentially ridiculing the concept while seeming to support it, doublespeak that the women present interpret flawlessly while the men stay unaware. I've examined hundreds of Victorian women's confidential journals and correspondence, and you couldn't fathom how they genuinely discussed men when private. They weren't the fragile, vacuous beings men supposed. They were tacticians, executing a prolonged strategy with restricted resources on a system structured against them. James Harwick advances his way progressively around the chamber, pausing for quick exchanges with different guests, as convention requires. Eleanor monitors his advancement peripherally while sustaining her discussion with Catherine. The anticipation game is agonizing, but essential. Any transparent enthusiasm would be social destruction. Meanwhile, across the chamber, another scenario develops. Mrs. Harwick, James's mother, exchanges quietly with Eleanor's mother. These two women, supposedly reviewing philanthropic endeavours, are genuinely performing preliminary marriage discussions disguised as informal dialogue. Your Eleanor has matured into such an attractive young woman, Mrs. Harwick states. I hear she's thoroughly accomplished in music and languages. You're too gracious, Mrs. Hartley answers. We've been blessed in her instructors. Your James has achieved distinction at Oxford, I'm told. You must be extraordinarily proud. This apparently benign transaction is genuinely a meticulous evaluation of comparative resources. Mrs. Harwick is appraising Eleanor's talents and associations, while Mrs. Hartley subtly emphasises James's schooling and potential. Neither references wealth or rank explicitly. That would be tasteless. But both grasp the actual discussion addresses whether their respective families would be beneficially united through matrimony. The captivating aspect about Victorian upper-class marriage preparations is that they were chiefly orchestrated between the mothers, not the fathers. Men might review financial arrangements and agreements at the concluding phase, but women distinguished appropriate partnerships and coordinated the preliminary meetings well before men participated. James ultimately approaches Eleanor and Catherine, Miss Montgomery, Miss Hartley. He acknowledges them with a modest bow. I trust I encounter you, both thriving. Thoroughly thriving, thank you, Mr. Harwick, Catherine responds. We were precisely examining Miss Hartley's exceptional ability for the pianoforte. Indeed, James directs his consideration to Eleanor. I experienced the privilege of hearing Miss Hartley perform at the Bennets last season. Chopin, wasn't it? most eloquently executed. Eleanor's pulse accelerates, though her countenance displays nothing beyond courteous recognition. You possess an exceptional memory, Mr. Harwick. For subjects of genuine excellence, invariably the praise is communicated with absolute decorum. Yet the minimal stress on genuine transmits an unmistakable signal. In a realm where forthright demonstration of attraction is prohibited, such subtleties represent everything. Catherine, understanding her function in this choreography, elegantly withdraws. I suspect my aunt is beckoning for me. Kindly excuse me. Now, appropriately isolated, though in complete visibility of the assembled room, Eleanor and James can exchange more straightforwardly, always within the parameters of rigorous propriety. Every gaze in the chamber monitors them while pretending otherwise. Every auditory sense strains to capture their statements while affecting disinterest. "Oxford has served you satisfactorily, Mr. Harwick?" Eleanor inquires. The conventional beginning for dialogue with a young man lately returned from university. "Adequately so," he answers, though I discovered myself progressively anxious to return to London society as the semester advanced. Interpretation. "I was contemplating you." Eleanor activates her fan marginally, not completely, which would be inappropriate, but sufficient to establish a perception of modest seclusion. "London has been somewhat tedious in your absence. Limited fresh individuals of significance." "I observed you were absent. I shall be participating in the Wilkinsons' dinner tomorrow evening," James references, apparently as an incidental observation. "Might I anticipate encountering you there additionally?" This is as forthright as a Victorian gentleman could express in demonstrating attraction. By notifying Eleanor of his participation at an occasion she's probable to attend, he's signalling his aspiration to persist their association in a socially permissible fashion. "I understand we are anticipated." "Indeed," Eleanor responds, her attention modestly focused on her fan rather than his countenance. "Splendid. Perhaps you might be convinced to perform. I especially appreciate Beethoven's sonatas. The citation of particular music is meaningful. He's providing her intelligence to prepare. Proposing future exchanges are not simply feasible, but expected." Eleanor permits herself a modest smile. "If Lady Wilkinson solicits it, I should be delighted to accommodate." Their dialogue persists in this manner, superficially regarding music, literature and current social occasions, but genuinely establishing reciprocal attraction and harmony through encrypted language and refined signals. To the uninformed spectator, they're simply participating in the traditional civilities anticipated between young individuals of respectable upbringing. To the experienced perception, which encompasses every woman in the chamber, they're executing the Victorian equivalent of ardent courtship. It was like maintaining two simultaneous dialogues occurring concurrently, the overt one that anyone could detect and the covert one saturated with alternate meanings, allusions and physical signals that only the designated receiver completely comprehended. Victorian courtship wasn't suppressed. It was transformed into this extraordinarily elaborate mechanism of communication. Following exactly the suitable duration, adequate enough to demonstrate specific fascination, not excessive as to generate speculation, James excuses himself to address other attendees. This too is mandatory. Excessive concentrated consideration on one young woman would establish anticipations that could harm her standing if not promptly succeeded by official courtship. As he withdraws, Eleanor experiences both dissatisfaction and respite. Every exchange is a taxing display, demanding perpetual alertness and assessment. The minutest error could devastate everything. Lady Montgomery's penetrating observation has detected everything. She summons to her nephew, Lord Pembroke, and communicates quietly. The young man acknowledges and proceeds to Eleanor. "Miss Hartley, might I acquire you some nourishment? The citrus cakes are exceptionally fine." This seemingly harmless proposition is genuinely Lady Montgomery's indication of endorsement. By instructing her nephew to demonstrate Eleanor consideration, she's communicating that Eleanor has succeeded inspection and is considered deserving of sustained admission in their sphere. How considerate Lord Pembroke. A citrus cake would be delightful. As Lord Pembroke retrieves the nourishment, Eleanor's mother captures her attention from across the chamber and provides an almost undetectable acknowledgement. Another successful passage of dangerous social currents. The tea persists for another 60 minutes, a precisely coordinated display of cultivation and composure. When the Hartleys ultimately depart, the elaborate farewell ceremony commences. Appreciation must be conveyed to Lady Montgomery in precisely appropriate language. Cordial enough to demonstrate gratitude, not excessive enough to appear vulgar. Farewells to other attendees must recognise comparative standing without being transparently stratified. Even the sequence of withdrawal is consequential. Departing too promptly implies the hospitality was inadequate. Too delayed suggests an absence of other social commitments. The Hartleys schedule their departure flawlessly after the Pembrokes' slightly inferior standing, but preceding the Hawicks' slightly superior. In the carriage journey homeward, Eleanor ultimately permits her rigid bearing to ease slightly. Her mother, however, stays attentive and analytical. "You performed admirably with James Harwick," she states, her inflection transmitting measured commendation, though possibly a degree too receptive to his consideration. Constraint, Eleanor. Perpetual constraint. Yes, mother. Eleanor recognises this critique as genuinely significant praise. Her mother anticipates flawlessness and infrequently acknowledges when Eleanor simply satisfies requirements. Lady Montgomery distinctly supports the alliance. Her directive to Lord Pembroke was most promising. This remark discloses how abundant intelligence was transmitted in that drawing room beyond literal discussions. Every motion, furniture placement and social formality conveyed significance comprehensible only to those proficient in the unwritten vocabulary of Victorian society. "The Wilkinsons' dinner tomorrow will be decisive," her mother proceeds. "James has fundamentally announced his purpose to pursue his attentions. We must guarantee you appear amenable, but not impatient. The tactical preparation never ceases. Every social commitment is a venture requiring thorough preparation and implementation. There is no reprieve from the presentation." When they reach home, Eleanor is physically and intellectually depleted. The psychological exertion of sustaining flawless composure while managing intricate social complexity has exhausted her entirely. Yet she must still attire for dinner and preserve suitable dialogue with her father and brothers. Only in the seclusion of her bedroom, with Jane's support, can she ultimately discard the protection of propriety alongside her confining garments. "How was Lady Montgomery's tea?" Miss Jane requests as she releases Eleanor's gown. "Encouraging," Eleanor answers, too fatigued for comprehensive clarification. Mr. Harwick was most considerate. Jane's dexterous fingers manipulate the corset fastenings. That's favourable information. "He appeared a gentleman of admirable character when I witnessed him at the Bennets." This transaction emphasises another dimension of Victorian upper-class existence. Servants frequently understood their employers' social networks better than one might imagine. Having accompanied Eleanor to the Bennets' musical evening, Jane had developed her own assessment of James Harwick by observing how he treated the help, a revealing measure of character that escaped Eleanor's notice entirely. As the corset finally loosens its hold, Eleanor draws her first full breath in hours. The sensation is wonderful, though fleeting. Tomorrow means the Wilkinsons' dinner and another round on the social circuit. "The blue silk for tomorrow, I think," Eleanor announces, planning already with the pearl hair accessories. "An excellent selection, miss. Very flattering." Eleanor settles at her vanity as Jane works through her hair. 100 strokes, as beauty conventions require. In the reflection, she recognises not victory, but weariness. The perpetual act, the never-ending strategy, the bodily restrictions, all exact their price. "Jane," she says abruptly, "are you ever thankful not to have been born into this existence?" The question violates propriety. Servants' emotions aren't usually topics for conversation, but Eleanor feels too drained to preserve boundaries. Jane's movements hesitate momentarily in their rhythm. Every station has its difficulties. Miss? A careful response that discloses nothing while acknowledging reality. Neither woman enjoys true liberty, simply different forms of limitation. Eleanor's cage might be decorated with gold and Jane's fashioned from steel, but cages they remain regardless. I sometimes imagine what it might feel like, Eleanor goes on, her tone quiet, to just speak one's mind, to behave without weighing every outcome. A risky indulgence, I'd suppose, Jane answers, continuing her work, especially for women. This rare instant of frankness between lady and maid exposes the essential truth of Victorian female existence. Regardless of class distinctions, their existences are shaped by restriction, pretense, and the cautious manoeuvring through regulations established by and serving men. The social ritual resumes tomorrow with fresh patterns and arrangements, but the identical fundamental beat. Eleanor will wear her costume, learn her steps, and execute her part with flawless accuracy because the option, social oblivion, is inconceivable. As Jane completes her hair, Eleanor releases her for the night. "Thank you, Jane. You may go." Finally alone, Eleanor sits on her bed's edge, no longer the ideal Victorian young woman, just a weary girl considering her destiny. If everything proceeds favourably with James Harwick, she'll trade her father's household for her husband's. One set of limitations for another. Is this her desire? The question itself seems almost irrelevant. Desire holds minimal space in her life's formula. Stability, status, kinship, partnership. These constitute the pertinent variables. Her mother would be appalled at the mere concept of weighing personal inclination in something as consequential as matrimony. Yet as Eleanor readies for sleep, she permits herself a modest private grin. James Harwick had observed her performing Chopin. He had recalled it. And something in his expression when he mentioned seeing her tomorrow indicated a human being, not just an appropriate prospect. Perhaps within the intricate boundaries of Victorian decorum, something authentic might remain achievable. Not liberty as we would comprehend it now, but instances of genuine rapport. Regardless of the pretense, Eleanor slides beneath cool linens, her frame thankful for freedom from boning and constricting laces. Tomorrow's presentation looms with greater consequences and intensified examination. But tonight, in her bedroom's refuge, she can temporarily discard the facade and simply exist. Beyond her window, London maintains its nighttime existence. In parlours throughout Mayfair and Belgravia, comparable scenes develop. Women weighing advantages, men building connections, servants watching and facilitating, the massive apparatus of Victorian civilization grinding onward. The regulations stay unseen but unconditional. The presentation never genuinely stops, and morning will deliver yet another chance to ascend or descend in society's judgment, contingent on how expertly one executes the game. The Wilkinsons' residence burns with illumination, every pane a brilliant square against London's darkness. Vehicles queue along the curb outside, releasing elegantly attired passengers into the crisp night atmosphere. 7 o'clock exactly. Arriving fashionably delayed would be deemed offensive for a dinner summons. Inside, the mood buzzes with expectation, not merely because of the Hartley-Harwick possible union that has sparked conversation across Mayfair, but because dinner gatherings represented the supreme exhibition of Victorian social rank. Every component, from the invitation roster to the tableware choices, would be examined and recalled. The Hartley family and Miss Eleanor Hartley, the major domo proclaims, as Eleanor and her parents step into the brilliant entrance corridor. Eleanor's abdomen tightens despite her external calm. Her blue silk dress swishes quietly as she surrenders her shawl to an attending footman. The pearl decorations in her meticulously styled hair capture illumination from the crystal lighting fixtures. Months of scheming and social orchestration have culminated in this night. "My dear Mrs. Hartley, how wonderful," Lady Wilkinson effuses, performing air kisses with their hostess, and Miss Eleanor appearing absolutely luminous. The Wilkinsons position themselves just within the parlour, conducting the ceremonial reception sequence that initiates every formal dinner. Behind them, the space already teems with visitors engaged in the pre-meal circulation crucial to forming the evening's social currents. Eleanor surveys the assembly while seeming not to. James Harwick has already arrived, absorbed in discussion with Lord Montgomery beside the hearth. Their gazes connect briefly across the chamber, and he provides a barely perceptible acknowledgement. The motion produces a small excitement within her, despite its reserve, or maybe because of it. "I once visited a historically faithful Victorian dinner reconstruction at a London museum. The guide explained they needed to drill the performers for months simply to perfect the visual contact protocols. Too forthright seemed improper. Too evasive appeared suspicious. There existed literally an appropriate method to regard someone without appearing to regard them. Miss Hartley," a voice disrupts her contemplation. "A delight to encounter you again so quickly." Eleanor pivots to discover Lord Pembroke, Lady Montgomery's nephew from yesterday's tea gathering. His attendance suggests Lady Montgomery's sustained endorsement of Eleanor's social momentum. "Lord Pembroke," she recognises with a slight curtsy. "I hope Lady Montgomery remains well this evening." "Perfectly well, though regrettably prevented. A minor headache." The implication is transparent. Lady Montgomery's non-attendance isn't a social rebuff to the Wilkinsons, merely a wellness matter. "Please express my concern when next you encounter her." This interaction, completely ordinary on its surface, strengthens Eleanor's association with Lady Montgomery's powerful network. Every dialogue at these functions serves numerous objectives, social advancement being paramount among them. Across the chamber, Charlotte Wilson has likewise arrived with her spouse and offspring. Though the Wilsons inhabit a lesser social stratum than the Hartleys, their presence at this dinner illustrates the intricate structure of Victorian civilization. Not all attendees were equivalents, but each fulfilled a function in the social arrangement. Charlotte intercepts Eleanor's glance and extends a deferential nod, recognizing their comparative standings while discreetly referencing their coincidental encounter. The middle-class woman is utilizing her restricted advantages skillfully. Meanwhile, downstairs, the genuine engine of the night's spectacle operates at maximum capacity. The Wilkinsons' culinary area is a setting of managed pandemonium. Their chef, flushed and bellowing, conducts an elaborate choreography of preparations and servers. Footmen stand prepared, waiting to transport silver serving pieces. Upstairs, kitchen assistants rush between stations, applying finishing touches and removing stray sauce traces from dish edges. "If that soufflé collapses, girl, you'll find yourself dismissed before dawn," the chef roars at a quaking helper. The warning isn't hollow. A spoiled course at a significant dinner could genuinely cost a domestic worker their employment. Victorian masters demanded excellence and dismissed those who couldn't deliver it. Jane, temporarily assigned to the Wilkinsons' personnel for the occasion, a typical arrangement for substantial events, assists, arranging delicate botanical embellishments on confection plates. Though not immediately involved with Eleanor this evening, her position below provides her entrance to domestic chatter that might advantage her mistress subsequently. "I've learned the Howick gentleman's been inquiring about Miss Hartley for ages," a Wilkinson housemaid murmurs as they labour alongside. His manservant mentions he preserved her dance programme from the Bennet's soirée. Jane archives this intelligence while maintaining her features impassive. Indeed. How intriguing. These domestic intelligence systems functioned beneath the sparkling social exterior, like subterranean streams bearing currents of knowledge invisible to those overhead. Back in the parlour, a delicate transformation happens as Mr. Wilkinson consults his timepiece and signals to the major domo. The dining moment has come. The major domo approaches James Harwick and whispers something privately. James adjusts his already perfect evening dress and proceeds toward Eleanor. "Miss Hartley," he states with a ceremonial bow, "may I receive the privilege of accompanying you into dinner?" This isn't a spontaneous inquiry. The dining companion assignments were meticulously prearranged by the hosts with substantial social ramifications. By designating James to accompany Eleanor, the Wilkinsons are openly recognising and endorsing their potential attachment. "Thank you, Mr. Harwick," Eleanor responds, positioning her gloved fingers gently on his extended arm. "You're extremely gracious." As the gathered visitors proceed into the dining chamber in their designated pairs, a distinct hierarchy materialises. The hostess, accompanied by the most distinguished male attendee, guides the procession. The host, accompanying the most distinguished female attendee, enters finally. Between them, couples are ordered in declining sequence of social significance. The Wilkinsons' dining chamber displays a stunning presentation of Victorian extravagance. The extensive mahogany surface shines with buffing, arranged with damask textiles, sterling silverware and delicate porcelain. Ornate candlesticks and fresh botanical displays establish a scene of affluence designed to astound. You cannot comprehend how absurdly particular Victorian table arrangements were. I've examined authentic dinner preparation documents where footmen needed to position each utensil precisely 1 inch from the adjacent. All spoons required perfect alignment, and stemware needed to create an exact angular formation. One incorrectly placed implement could devastate a hostess's standing. Each arrangement includes a daunting collection of specialized implements and glassware, no fewer than 5 forks, numerous spoons, various knives, and 3 or more glasses. For the middle-class attendees, like the Wilsons, this creates a specific potential hazard. Employing the incorrect tool at the inappropriate moment would immediately identify one as socially subordinate. Charlotte Wilson examines the arrangements with deliberately hidden apprehension, though she grasps the fundamental principles. Progress from the exterior inward. Seafood fork for seafood portion, broth spoon for broth. The more unusual implements, like vegetable tongs or fruit shears, present frightening prospects for mistakes. James positions Eleanor with rehearsed elegance before assuming his own seat alongside her. The seating configuration is another deliberate aspect of the night. Spouses are never positioned together, and the most socially harmonious visitors are arranged to promote engaging discussion. "I comprehend you're quite the equestrian, Miss Hartley," James mentions as the initial course, clear broth, is delivered by wordless white-gloved footmen. "I appreciate riding when conditions allow." Eleanor answers cautiously, raising her broth spoon in the proper fashion, dipping outward from herself, sipping from the edge rather than the point. Their dialogue stays superficially regarding horses and rural activities, but the underlying meaning investigates compatibility and mutual preferences. Surrounding them, comparable exchanges bloom and diminish, each attendee executing their social function with differing levels of proficiency. The dinner itself is an endurance test, not a sprint. 10 or more portions will be delivered across multiple hours, each with its particular ceremonies and demands. Broth yields to seafood, then to a meat portion, fowl course, roasted dish, and various intermediate courses, before finishing with confection, produce, and kernels. Between portions, dialogue must continue without pause while seeming effortless. Particular subjects are absolutely prohibited: sickness, finances, politics in mixed gatherings, faith, and anything that might provoke intense feeling. This leaves a confined range of permissible themes: literature, nothing divisive, shared musical interests, visual arts, journeys, and judiciously sanitized social commentary. Charlotte Wilson, positioned between a titled gentleman and a retired military officer, traverses these limitations with resolve, if not innate comfort. Her offspring, Emily, at her initial adult dinner gathering, observes her mother for signals while trying to interact with her dining companion, an aged gentleman with restricted conversational capacity. "Do you discover London pleasant this season, Sir Arthur?" Charlotte inquires, selecting the most secure possible beginning. "Acceptable, Mrs. Wilson. Acceptable, though the haze last Tuesday proved most disagreeable for my health." Charlotte stifles a grimace. Wellness subjects border on unseemly, and she smoothly changes direction. "Indeed, I discovered the National Gallery's recent display quite restorative that precise day." "Have you found opportunity to attend?" This adept transition demonstrates Charlotte's social capability despite her middle-class origins. She may lack aristocratic naturalness, but she's conquered the fundamental regulations. Eleanor, meanwhile, discovers herself in the night's most desirable situation. James Harwick demonstrates an engaged dining companion, harmonising appropriate formality with sincere curiosity. Their exchange progresses from horses to literature to music with remarkable ease. "I've been examining Mr. Dickens' most recent work," James references as the seafood portion materialises. His social commentary is remarkably perceptive, though occasionally somewhat excessive. "I discovered his characterizations quite affecting," Eleanor responds, measuring his reaction. A gentleman's literary perspectives frequently disclosed his political leanings, which consequently suggested his positions toward women's functions. "As did I," James confesses, startling her with his openness, though I wouldn't acknowledge as much in my university society, where emotional reactions to literature are regarded rather out of fashion. This minor revelation, confessing to unconventional sensitivity, generates a moment of real connection. Within the act, Eleanor experiences a warmth of authentic satisfaction distinct from social achievement. Downstairs, the culinary machinery functions at complete capacity. Each portion must be impeccably synchronized, delivered heated or chilled as suitable, and displayed with perfect refinement. The domestics themselves maintain a rigid hierarchy reflecting that overhead. The major domo directs footmen, the head housekeeper manages maids, and the chef commands absolutely over culinary personnel. Jane assists readying finger vessels for the produce portion, observing as the Wilkinsons' ladies' attendant shares knowledge about their mistress's forthcoming social arrangements. This intelligence will prove beneficial when counselling Eleanor about suitable occasions and attire for upcoming functions. "They're claiming Mr. Harwick's considerably attracted to your Miss Hartley," the lady's attendant remarks. "His manservant reports he's been insufferable regarding standards since returning from Oxford, rejecting his neckwear thrice for retying and obsessing perpetually about his evening dress. Miss Hartley discovers him pleasant." Jane responds neutrally, though she preserves this encouraging intelligence. Domestics recognised that romance was developing well before official proclamations based on their close familiarity with their master's patterns and conduct. A gentleman abruptly concerned with his presentation, or a woman investing additional time choosing gowns, frequently indicated developing affection before the individuals themselves completely recognised it. As the complex meal advances, delicate power transitions materialise around the surface. Mrs. Hartley trades significant glances with Mrs. Harwick, their previous tentative coalition intensifying as they witness their children's clear compatibility. Lord Montgomery dominates the host's focus with commercial discussion, delicately asserting his supremacy in that domain. Even the middle-class Wilsons discover chances for modest social triumphs when the dialogue shifts to recent musical presentations. Emily Wilson's keyboard abilities are referenced appreciatively by Lady Pembroke, a meaningful recognition from an aristocratic source. The confection portion arrives, a magnificent construction of spun sweetener, sculpted frozen creams and ornamental fruits that produces suitable sounds of appreciation. This concluding culinary display symbolises the culmination of the kitchen personnel's exertions and the hostess's preparation. "How splendid, Lady Wilkinson," Mrs. Hartley observes. "Your chef has considerably exceeded expectations." The praise, though ostensibly regarding cuisine, actually recognises the Wilkinsons' social accomplishment in delivering such a remarkable dinner. In Victorian civilization, even commendation was encrypted and saturated with significance. Following confection comes the night's most meaningful gender ceremony. Lady Wilkinson captures the attention of the most distinguished woman attending and provides an almost invisible signal in acknowledgement. The woman stands, indicating all other women to follow suit. "Shall we permit the gentlemen their port?" she proposes, though it's not genuinely an inquiry. The women proceed from the dining chamber in the identical sequence they arrived, returning to the parlour for coffee and conversation, while the men stay behind for more potent beverages, tobacco, and more forthright discussion. This division, lasting roughly 30 minutes, was an absolute Victorian custom. In the parlour, the women reorganise themselves into dialogue clusters, no longer restricted by dining placement. This is when the night's genuine female-focused social labour happens. Partnerships are established, intelligence traded, and standings subtly moulded. Mrs. Harwick approaches Eleanor with calculated casualness. "My dear Miss Hartley, you must inform me about your philanthropic endeavours. James referenced you maintain an interest in children's instruction." This forthright engagement from James's mother indicates serious consideration. By mentioning a prior exchange between Eleanor and James, she recognises their developing attachment while evaluating Eleanor's appropriateness as a prospective daughter-in-law. "Indeed, Mrs. Harwick, the Sunday instruction at St. Mary's has been my specific concentration these previous 2 years. The dialogue that ensues is ostensibly regarding charitable activities, but actually permits Mrs. Harwick to assess Eleanor's temperament, principles, and social refinement beyond the organised dinner environment. Eleanor, comprehending precisely what's transpiring, displays her finest qualities while preserving suitable humility. Meanwhile, Charlotte Wilson captures a scarce chance to converse directly with Mrs. Hartley, exploiting their brief marketplace meeting. "Such a satisfaction to encounter you again, Mrs. Hartley. I hope you obtained everything you needed at Covent Garden yesterday." The allusion to their previous meeting creates connection, while the inquiry is safely inconsequential. Mrs. Hartley, cognizant of Lord Montgomery's previous remarks about Charlotte's husband's legal aid to her sibling, reacts with measured cordiality. "Indeed, Mrs. Wilson, most adequate. I comprehend your daughter performs the pianoforte quite admirably." This modest recognition, though distant from an invitation to closeness, represents considerable social value for Charlotte. Being acknowledged by Mrs. Hartley elevates her position among the other middle-class women attending. In the dining chamber, the men have rearranged themselves for port and tobacco. With women absent, dialogue shifts to previously forbidden subjects: politics, commerce, and more forthright social evaluations. Harwick, Lord Montgomery addresses James's father. "That son of yours appears considerably attracted to Hartley's daughter. The frankness would be scandalous in mixed gatherings, but is permissible in this male sanctuary." Mr. Harwick swirls his port contemplatively. She originates from respectable lineage. Hartley's finances are stable, family associations acceptable. The daughter herself appears properly educated. This dispassionate assessment of Eleanor's qualities would horrify Victorian sensibilities if articulated before women, yet represents the pragmatic foundation underlying romantic connections. Matrimony was fundamentally a commercial transaction, especially in upper-class environments. James, positioned nearby, preserves a neutral demeanour, despite his discomfort with this evaluation of Eleanor as reproductive investment. His personal sentiments are more nuanced than social and financial considerations, though he would never confess as much to these gentlemen. Thomas Wilson, Charlotte's husband, stays silent during this interaction. Though present, he inhabits a lesser social stratum and understands better than to inject himself into aristocratic matrimonial discussions. Instead, he converses with an adjacent gentleman about less significant subjects, accumulating useful commercial knowledge while appearing merely amiable. Following the designated interval, the host stands. "Shall we rejoin the women, gentlemen?" The men proceed to the parlour, where the night's concluding phase commences. Now arrives the amusement segment. Music, card diversions, or potentially acting games. For less ceremonial assemblies, these pursuits provide organised occasions for sustained social engagement while displaying talents. Miss Hartley has committed to a musical demonstration, Lady Wilkinson declares. Once the groups have reunited, Miss Wilson will graciously manage the sheets. This combination is meaningful. It positions Eleanor in the focus while providing Emily Wilson nearness to the night's social nucleus. Both young women profit, though in distinct manners, reflecting their different positions. Eleanor advances to the pianoforte with rehearsed poise. The instrument itself is a prestige emblem for the Wilkinsons, and costly Broadwood grand, situated to exhibit their prosperity and cultural sophistication. I've genuinely performed on a restored Victorian Broadwood piano at a historical institution. The mechanism was considerably heavier than contemporary pianos. You needed to genuinely exert your fingers. Victorian women cultivated substantial finger power just to seem delicately musical. As Eleanor commences performing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the composition James had mentioned favouring, the chamber falls suitably hushed. Her playing shows real skill, though it doesn't quite dazzle. What matters isn't virtuosity, but displaying proper feminine refinement and the family's dedication to her education. James observes with clear interest. Victorian etiquette forbids excessive displays of feeling, yet his concentrated gaze speaks powerfully in a culture where restrained signals carry tremendous meaning. After Eleanor concludes, the clapping is suitably measured. Enthusiastic, overly effusive praise would seem tasteless. Lady Wilkinson proposes that others might entertain, sustaining the evening's energy while sharing social chances. As time advances, guests start leaving in a sequence as precisely arranged as their entrance. Those with lesser standing depart first, while the most prominent visitors stay longest. Their prolonged presence dignifies the hosts. Charlotte and Thomas Wilson offer their goodbyes fairly early, having accomplished their social aims for the night. Emily has managed respectably at the pianoforte. Charlotte has strengthened her bond with Mrs. Hartley, and Thomas has obtained a favourable business contact. Eleanor and her parents stay until almost midnight, their delayed exit affirming their superior social rank. When they ultimately bid farewell, James personally accompanies Eleanor to the entry hall, another meaningful public display. "Your playing was exquisite, miss." "Hartley," he remarks as a footman fetches her cloak. "Beethoven himself would have been delighted." "You're far too generous, Mr. Harwick," she replies, though her gaze communicates more than her speech. "Perhaps I might visit you tomorrow afternoon. I understand your mother mentioned welcoming callers between 3 and 5. The proposition, correctly addressed through mentioning her mother rather than Eleanor directly, signifies a crucial move toward formal courtship. A gentleman wouldn't specify a particular calling hour unless his purposes were earnest. "I believe we shall be receiving," Eleanor confirms, her controlled exterior concealing inner existence. Elation. As the Hartleys' coach departs from the Wilkinsons' townhouse, the evening's intricate social spectacle ends. For Eleanor, the night has been a complete triumph. James's focus, Mrs. Harwick's evaluation, and her favourably received musical display all suggest upward social progress. Yet underneath the contentment exist weariness, the perpetual alertness needed to traverse Victorian social channels. Controlling every utterance, movement and expression demands a substantial price. Even victory feels rather empty when it's gained through such complicated pretense rather than genuine rapport. Throughout London, comparable scenes transpire as other dinner gatherings end. Staff clerks remove the elaborate arrangements while their masters evaluate social wins and losses. Everyone, irrespective of station, has been acting their designated parts in the grand theatre of Victorian life. In the Hartley's coach, Eleanor permits herself to recline against the padded seat, briefly abandoning flawless posture. Tomorrow delivers James's visit and the subsequent stage of their carefully managed courtship. The social ballet proceeds, its steps predetermined, yet its conclusion still undecided. As midnight descends over London, the social displays of the Victorian day slowly conclude. Gaslights cast pools of amber glow on deserted streets where coaches no longer clatter behind stone facades and shuttered curtains. The day's flowers' final ceremonies commence, each tier following their own established routines for the night hours. The Hartley's coach stops at their Mayfair residence, where lights still burn despite the advanced hour. Staff don't slumber until their masters do. The butler unlocks the door, the footman assists them down, and the apparatus of service maintains its constant rhythm. A most satisfying, peaceful evening, Mrs. Hartley declares as they step into the warmth of their residence. Her tone holds the calm fulfillment of a commander whose tactical plan has unfolded flawlessly. Indeed, her husband concurs, handing his hat and gloves to the attending butler. Young Harwick appears quite captivated by Eleanor. His father praised her highly. Eleanor remained silent, understanding her parents will examine the evening's social achievements without needing her contribution. Her function was to excel. Theirs is to scrutinise the outcomes and devise subsequent moves. This, too, is part of the invisible choreography of Victorian domestic life. The residence is muted, but not silent despite the late hour. Staff move softly through halls, hallways and back stairs, arranging the family's nighttime ceremonies. The evening rotation of a prosperous Victorian household staff had countless tasks, turning down linens, warming water for bathing, fixing hot beverages and setting out nightclothes, all while staying as undetectable as possible. I once spoke with a curator who dedicated her profession to examining Victorian night customs. She explained aristocratic homes operated like medical facilities. Someone was constantly awake, constantly labouring, and the patients, the family, were never left unattended. It was a draining arrangement, created purely to prove that you could afford to drain people. In her chamber, Eleanor discovers Jane waiting to assist her undress. The lady's attendant appears fatigued. She's been awake since before sunrise and will labour until Eleanor is prepared for rest. But her actions stay efficient and precise. Mr. Harwick will visit tomorrow afternoon, Eleanor mentions quietly, as Jane starts unfastening the apparently infinite row of fastenings down her spine. "That's wonderful news, miss." Jane's hands work skillfully despite her exhaustion. Lady Wilkinson's attendant noted he refused 2 other events' invitations to join tonight's supper. This staff intelligence verifies what Eleanor already anticipates. James's curiosity is authentic, not simply the result of their parents' social manipulation. Piece by piece, Eleanor discards the physical constraints of her public identity. First the gown, then the underskirts, the corset, and finally the undergarment, until she stands in only her light cotton nightdress. The shift is both corporeal and mental. With each shed garment, she transforms less the ideal Victorian young woman and more simply herself. "Would you care for hot cocoa tonight, miss?" Jane inquires, collecting the removed clothing. "Yes, please. And Jane?" Eleanor pauses, then proceeds. "Thank you for everything today." The recognition crosses the invisible barrier between lady and servant, a small record acknowledgement of Jane's personhood beyond her position. Jane's face softens briefly before she returns her professional bearing. "Of course, miss. I'll come back shortly with your cocoa." Alone, Eleanor approaches her vanity and starts withdrawing the pearl decorations from her tresses. The reflection in the glass looks younger without the social facade she maintains all day, lest the composed society debutante more a 21-year-old old woman with aspirations and doubts. Tonight signifies a pivotal moment. James Harwick's official visit tomorrow indicates serious objectives. If all advances as anticipated, their courtship will progress toward betrothal within months. The existence she's been groomed for since infancy, matrimony, parenthood, social administration approaches with growing velocity. Across town in their more humble Bloomsbury residence, the Wilson family has also arrived from the evening's social occasion. Their entrance lacks the ceremonial character of the Hartleys. No row of staff awaits them, only Martha, their maid of all work, who appears dead on her feet after an 18-hour shift. "I'll attend to the fire in your chamber, Ma." Martha says, accepting Charlotte's wrap. "Thank you, Martha. And then you may withdraw. We can handle ourselves." This regard for the servant's fatigue reflects Charlotte's origins. Unlike nobles who demand constant attendance, the middle class must weigh service expectations with practical constraints. Thomas Wilson sheds his own jacket and loosens his collar with obvious relief. The display of middle-class respectability weighs as heavily as aristocratic perfection, perhaps more so for being an ambition rather than a birthright. "You performed well tonight, Emily," he tells his daughter. Lady Pembroke's remark was quite notable. Emily radiates at this uncommon praise. "Do you really think so, father? I was terribly anxious." "Indeed. And your mother's exchange with Mrs. Hartley did not go overlooked." A beneficial connection. This family review of social tactics would startle aristocrats who regard such explicit recognition of social calculation vulgar. The middle class, however, must be more aware and intentional in their status-building attempts. Charlotte approaches the sideboard and pours her husband a modest glass of whiskey, another distinction from aristocratic households where staff would execute this duty. Robert Henderson seemed quite drawn to Emily. His father's maritime business is performing remarkably well. The suggestions are obvious. While Emily lacks Eleanor's opportunities, Robert Henderson signifies a sound match that would preserve or slightly enhance the family's social standing. In the middle-class marriage market, dramatic upward mobility is uncommon. Stability and modest elevation are the practical aims. As the Wilsons ready for bed with Martha's restricted assistance, their nighttime ceremonies echo aristocratic ones in intent, if not in sophistication. Charlotte's hair is combed out, though she counts no particular number of strokes. Thomas examines business documents before sleeping. Though not in a designated study with brandy and cigars, Emily rehearses her scales 1.5 final time, strengthening the accomplishments that comprise her marriage currency. Martha, meanwhile, ascends the narrow rear stairs to her small attic chamber, too drained to even shed her dress before dropping onto her thin mattress. Unlike Jane, who still has responsibilities to execute for Eleanor, Martha's shift finally concludes, though she'll wake again at 5 to ignite the household fires and start breakfast arrangements. Back in Mayfair, Jane comes back to Eleanor's chamber with a silver tray bearing hot cocoa in delicate porcelain. This nighttime beverage, presented in aristocratic bedchambers across London, signifies the closing service ceremony of the day. Jane assists Eleanor into bed, adjusts her pillows, and positions the tray across her lap, treating her mistress almost like a youngster, despite their comparable ages. "Will there be anything else tonight, miss?" "No, thank you, Jane. Get some rest yourself." Jane bows before departing, though she's far from completed with her own labour. Eleanor's blue gown must be cleaned and correctly preserved. her accessories recorded and stored away, her shoes polished and arranged for the next day served. Service persists long after the served have withdrawn. And here's something that would astonish your mind. Victorian ladies' attendants often rested on small roll-away beds or mats in dressing chambers adjacent to their mistresses' bedchambers. That meant they were basically on call 24/7. If the lady awoke at 3 a.m. wanting something, she just had to summon. In the staff quarters below stairs, the Hartley's household old staff finally assembles for their own late meal. The kitchen, silent after the day's cooking chaos, becomes briefly their territory. Footmen relax their livery collars, housemaids shed their caps, and for a few valuable moments they release the invisible burden of flawless service. "Mr. Howick's visiting tomorrow," Jane reports as she joins them, having finished Eleanor's immediate needs officially between 3 and 5. This intelligence electrifies the small assembly. Staff invest sentimentally in their master's social victories, partly because it reflects favourably on their own service, and partly because it offers vicarious involvement in a realm they can witness, but never enter. "Did you notice how he observed her at the pianoforte?" one of the football inquires, breaking into a rare grin, like a man perishing of thirst viewing a water pump. His valet says. "He's been intolerable since Oxford," the cook contributes, presenting Jane a plate of cold meat and bread, switching his garments 3 times before supper, and fretting over cufflinks like they're royal jewels. These insights, accumulated through the extensive staff intelligence system, sketch a more human portrait of James Harwick than Eleanor herself can access. The aristocracy's strict social codes restrict direct display of sentiment, but staff notice the unguarded instances that expose genuine feeling. "They'll create a striking couple, Mrs. Phillips," the housekeeper remarks with uncommon sentimentality, and Mr. Howick's staff describe him favourably, not one for needless censure or harshness. This judgment matters more than the family comprehends. A master's conduct towards staff discloses his genuine nature better than any social display. The staff's endorsement of James suggests well for Eleanor's future contentment in ways her parents would never consider to examine. As the staff complete their meal and arrange for their own brief rest, the discussion transitions to practical matter. Stomach tomorrow's fare, the washing schedule, an approaching dinner gathering. Their existences proceed in parallel to their employers, equally constrained by codes but with far greater stakes for violating them. Throughout London, in a cramped boarding house near the docks, another nighttime scene transpires, this one far separated from Mayfair's luxuries. Here, a former ladies' attendant named Sarah sits by a flickering candle, tallying the meagre coins that constitute her day's wages as a seamstress. Sarah once worked in a house like the Hartleys, until a moment's impropriety with a footman resulted in her termination. Without reference, without the all-important character reference from her previous master, she could never resume service. Now she survives on piecework, stitching her fingers raw and her vision failing from endless tiny stitches in dim light. Her destiny represents the precarious truth beneath Victorian society's refined surface. For women particularly, one misstep could mean permanent expulsion from respectable work. The same culture that idealized female virtue offered few routes to salvation for those who violated its limits. I discovered these devastating letters from terminated staff begging former masters for references. One woman wrote that she hadn't consumed food in 3 days and was contemplating throwing herself in the Thames. The lady of the house wrote impertinent request on the letter and archived it away. The cruelty beneath the courtesy was staggering. Sarah's nighttime ceremony bears little similarity to Eleanor's or even Martha's. No hot beverage awaits her, no prepared bed. She simply sheds her shawl, reclines fully dressed on her narrow cot, and extinguishes the precious candle. Tomorrow delivers more of the same endless labour for inadequate wages. The the constant spectre of starvation and displacement if her health or vision deteriorates. This too is Victorian England, the shadow truth that makes the glittering spirit social realm possible for every elegantly attired lady. Dozens of seamstresses labour 14-hour shifts for every elaborate dinner gathering. Kitchen staff toil from dawn until midnight, the invisible foundation of hardship beneath the visible exhibition of prosperity. Yet even at society's lowest tiers, codes dictate conduct. Sarah upholds certain principles. Her chamber is painfully spotless, her garments repaired with expert accuracy, her language free from vulgarity. Having descended from respectability, she maintains its external forms as evidence that she still belongs to the realm she forfeited. Meanwhile, in his bachelor lodgings near St. James's, James Harwick readies for rest with his valet's assistance. Unlike ladies, Victorian gentlemen had relatively straightforward nighttime ceremonies, shedding day garments, washing minimally, wearing nightshirts, perhaps reading or composing briefly before sleeping. "Will you be visiting Miss Hartley tomorrow, sir?" his valet inquires, as he suspends James's evening jacket. "Yes, Parker. Ensure that my morning jacket is ironed, will you? And the navy waistcoat form." "Very good. Good, sir." This dialogue, ostensibly about attire, actually conveys James's earnest aims. The designated garments signify formal daytime dress, suitable for a significant social visit, not the informal clothing of routine calls. The valet grasps immediately what this indicates. Alone in his bedchamber, James obtains a small book from his desk compartment. A volume of Tennyson's book poetry. Between its leaves lies a dance card from the Bennets' musicale last season. Eleanor's name, carefully inscribed beside two dances. He's preserved it for months. Though Victorian etiquette would consider such sentimentality embarrassingly effeminate, this private instant reveals what public display conceals. Genuine fondness beneath social couch circulation. Though educated to perceive marriage as a functional alliance between appropriate families, James finds himself attracted to Eleanor for less measurable reasons. Her musical perception, her sharp intelligence apparent beneath appropriate feminine restraint, her occasional glimpses of subtle wit. These attributes appeal to him beyond her social qualifications. Of course, he would never express these emotions so plainly, even to himself. Victorian emotional vocabulary, particularly for men, lacked terminology for such refined attraction. But the deliberately preserved dance card communicates volumes. That social tradition silences. As London's timepieces strike one, the city's nighttime metamorphosis proceeds. Gaslights are doused, shop entrances secured, streets cleared except for police officers on their rounds and the desperate or dangerous who occupy the night hours. Behind innumerable windows, candles and lamps are extinguished one by one. Eleanor completes her hot cocoa and moves the tray aside. The warmth of the beverage and the day's emotional expenditure merge to create pleasant sleepiness. Tomorrow delivers James's official visit and the subsequent stage of their evolving connection. For now, slumber beckons, a brief reprieve from social display. In their own bedchambers, Charlotte and Thomas Wilson examine the evening's achievements and outline tomorrow's approaches. Their social elevation demands more deliberate effort than the aristocracy's. But tonight they've made quantifiable advancement. Emily's musical display gained authentic approval, and Charlotte's alliance to Mrs. Hartley, however fragile, signifies valuable social capital. Below stairs, in attics and staff quarters throughout London, the invisible legion that sustains Victorian culture snatches brief hours of respite before tomorrow's toils commence. Their beds are firm, their chambers frigid, their prospects uncertain. Yet they've established small spaces of humanity within the rigid frameworks that restrict them. Even Sarah, the disgraced lady's attendant discovers momentary tranquility in slumber, the one condition that equalizes duchess and seamstress, master and servant. For a few hours, Victorian society's complex hierarchies dissolve into shared human frailty. This pattern of display and respite, public rigidity and private liberation, repeats day after day, year after year, constructing the complex social structure we now call Victorian culture. Each person, regardless of station, enacts their designated function in a vast drama they neither invented nor can abandon. Yet within these seemingly inflexible frameworks, authentic bonds sometimes develop. Eleanor and James's evolving affection, though moulded by social codes, contains seeds of real emotion. Jane's brief recognition of Eleanor as a person, not merely a mistress, builds a momentary connection across class divisions. Even Charlotte's calculated social positioning stems from authentic wish to ensure her daughter's future welfare. The invisible codes that regulate Victorian existence, complex, capricious, often merciless, nevertheless furnish the structure within which people address their deepest human requirements for connection, safety, and purpose. The social ballet, for all its manufactured steps, still permits human spirits to discover their natural tempo if they attend carefully enough. As night progresses toward sunrise, London rests, or feigns to. Tomorrow the display recommences again with fresh challenges, fresh possibilities, fresh prospects for ascending or declining in society's judgment. The codes stay unaltered, the stakes perpetually elevated, the ramifications of failure potentially ruinous. But tonight, in the brief intermission between social duties, even the most proper Victorian can discard their public persona and simply breathe. Eleanor glides towards slumber, her thoughts filled with eagerness of tomorrow's call. Charlotte reviews household ledgers in her dreams, computing social benefits along with monetary ones. Jane's depleted body finally eases after 18 hours of service. The social ballet halts, the melody temporarily quieted. Morning will introduce fresh figures, fresh formations, fresh combinations of partners, but the fundamental mental rhythms stay unmodified. This is the truth of Victorian England. Rigid frameworks paradoxically generating space for human narratives to develop in all their intricate, contradictory magnificence. And as you recline in your comfortable bed, liberated from whalebone and rigid social codes, consider how fortunate you are to witness this complex ballet from a secure distance. No corset is compressing, no perpetual fear of social errors, no 18-hour work days. Your body settles deeper into your mattress, plush and accommodating in a way Victorian beds never were. Your respiration decelerates, your consciousness drifts agreeably between past and present, and the pressure of invisible codes slowly dissipates as slumber nears. The Victorian social ballet persists in your imagination, but you're free to exit the ballroom whenever you decide, a privilege Eleanor, Jane and Charlotte never possessed. As you drift towards slumber, transported on gentle historical waves, remember that while we may idealise the sophistication of the Victorian period, its elegance came at a price few of us would willingly accept today. Rest now secure in your liberation from the invisible prison that both sheltered and confined the Victorians. Their elaborate social ceremonies make captivating narratives but demanding realities. As slumber enfolds you, be thankful for the simple blessing they never had the freedom to be flawed, unwatched and entirely yourself.